this is the first meeting we've had.
She said, Gary, we're ready to go.
Ready? Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the January meeting of the Oswego County IDA and call the meeting to order. Before we begin, I'd like to have our guests introduce themselves because some of them we were familiar with and we met with before, but some of them we're not sure. Also have the board introduce themselves to you. So we'll start in the back, please.
Sure. Hi, Lorraine Burrows, School Business Administrator for APW Central School District.
Okay. Welcome.
Herb Bearden, Glasgow, just serving.
Bob Wilmot, I'm with the Carpenter Union.
Chris Rowland, Edgemere Development, we're the development consultant on the East Lake Commons project.
Chris Carrick with the Central New York Regional Planning and Development Board, and we're working with Abundant Solar on the solar project.
Thank you and welcome. Glenn, you want to?
Yeah, I'm Glenn Schiff, IDA member.
Tim Saul, County Legislator, 98 member.
Barry Trimble, IDA.
Morris Valley County Legislator.
Kevin LaMontagne, I'm on the staff of Operations Oswego County and serve as the CFO of the IDA.
I'm Kevin Caracoli, General Counsel to the IDA.
Nick Canale, IDA.
Gary Toth, IDA.
Teresa Wilson, Operations, Oswego County.
Okay, again, thank you for coming and welcome. First item we have is minutes of December 20th meeting. Everybody get the minutes?
And
Do I have a motion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments?
I have a comment. There was one correction in the minutes that were sent out. In the one you have in your packet has been corrected. There was an issue on page 2 on the back of the first piece of paper. The amount approved for the lease financing for Universal Properties was $150,000 on the minutes you guys received. You all received was $300,000. So it was a typo. It's been corrected.
We need a motion to amend.
Haven't been approved yet.
Yeah, minutes haven't been approved, so we're all.
Correct in this format.
Yeah, corrected.
Yeah.
That's the only change.
We'll approve as amended.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, you also received the treasurer's report from September 30th, 2019. Everybody get them in the mail and get a chance to review them. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
I'll move it.
Motion by Len, second.
I'll second.
Second by Nick. A motion and a second. Any questions or comments on the financial report? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried. Okay, notice of meeting, meeting notice was placed in plating time, excuse me, in January 2nd. So we're good there. Now for the reaffirmation of our agency's policies, I guess Kevin, you would be.
For this, Kevin will cover it, but turn to the number 4 in your packets. You have a 2-page stapled sheet.
So every year, the agency is required to review its policies, update them as necessary, and reaffirm those that are existing. This is our full slate of policies that are required by the ABO, the General Municipal Law, and our local policies. The good news is there aren't any changes from last year that would warrant a revision or a modification of these policies, but it is necessary that we reaffirm the agency policies at this time. I'm happy to entertain any questions, but it'd be my recommendation that a motion be made and reaffirmation of these policies occur today.
Okay, do I have a motion on the reaffirmation of our agency policies?
I'll move it.
Nick, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Barry. Any questions or anything for Kevin or about the policies that we have listed in front of you? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, carried. Thank you, Kevin. All right, so we're gonna jump to 6.
Yes, please. Yeah.
All right. 6, East Lake Commons. Chris, you wanna start us off, or how do you wanna do this, Kevin?
Chris, First, let me point the board to number 6 in your packet. We have created a simple summary sheet. I'll give you an overview of what's happening, and then Chris can cover some details.
Sure.
East Lake Commons is the project on the east side of the river, First and Bridge, where Midtown Plaza is. And this has had full IDA approval for financial assistance, a pilot agreement, etc. in the past. The company has come to us and informed us that the project is changing. And the piece of paper you have in number 6 summarizes those changes. We've reviewed this with our special counsel, Barclay Damon. Kevin has also reviewed it, and we don't, from a standpoint of the prior approval, it's not a significant change, but what we need to do is consider approving a resolution that would amend the approval to reflect these particulars of the project. So the product modification, it's not a significant change that would require a whole new process, and a new public hearing and a new slate of agreements. So instead, we're proposed to review and approve this resolution to amend the particulars for the project.
Yeah, and fundamentally, the project is decreasing in scope, right? So if it were increasing in any measurable way, our opinion would be different from a legal perspective, but because it is going from, for instance, six stories to 5 stories, the square footage is reducing, the commercial footage is reducing, parking space requirements are reducing. All of it is shrinking, so to speak. One thing that is not changing is the pilot payment that was approved by the IDA. The company is not asking for that payment to be reduced in any way. So based on all of that and review of the final approving resolution that was adopted, I think it was March of 2018.
I think so.
It is my opinion, special counsel's opinion, and staff that entertaining a motion to simply modify this proposal would be appropriate at this time without any further approvals necessary or further review. I will point out, however, that the city of Oswego is reviewing from a zoning perspective, the project, because it is shrinking, it's changed, so the company's going through the zoning process, but it does not affect what the IDA, the financial assistance and approvals that the IDA's provided to the project.
Okay, Kevin, thank you.
With that, I guess.
Chris, would you like to just give us an update on the project and where I think some of the reasons for the changes?
Sure.
Chris, if you could, just because of the camera, if you could come over here where this chair is.
Sure.
And that way we can,
Check it out there.
thank you.
Use my shovel.
So, I think as you guys know, we've been working on this project for a long time now, and the major factor in these changes is the financing that we are getting to complete the project. We had to work within the confines of what they were able to finance. So, in order to bring our costs down, we had to make some adjustments to the scale. At one point, we were considering a parking deck. Financially, it just wasn't something that we could pay for. But we wanted to preserve the amount of units the best we could. We had 72 units. We now have 70, despite removing the 6th floor that was proposed originally. In order to do so, we had to bring some units down to where some of the originally proposed commercial space was. So that is shrunk to 33,000 square feet. But overall, the project looks the same as it did previously, minus 1 floor. And as schedule goes, like they said, we're going through local approvals again with the city, which we are wrapping up on February 4th. And our major financing partner, New York State Housing Finance Agency, we're working with them to close this project in March and to hopefully start construction, April 1st. So it's been a long road. We've made some changes in order to, keep the project financially feasible, and that's really where we stand today. Is the home stretch, hopefully, and really getting shovels in the ground in the next few months.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question or?
Let's take a motion in a second, and we'll open it for comments and questions. So I have a motion on the
Make a
resolution. Morris, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Barry. Okay, are there any questions, comments?
Just curious, I see you're going from 24 market rate units and 48 affordable to all affordable. What's the reasoning behind that?
So that's tied to the financing as well. When we started negotiations with the Housing Finance Agency, we were, this is what we had proposed was the 24 market rate units. And that agency really can't pay for true unrestricted market rate units.
Okay.
So we reduced that, they're 80% area median income units, but the rents actually remain relatively unchanged.
Okay.
So it was a function of, how do we pay for, 70 units here?
The 3,300 square feet as opposed to 10,000, you can get a lot more units of commercial space in 10,000 than you can in 3,300. I wish you could have done it the other way. I'm sure you do too, but.
Right now, the plan is to have two spaces separately metered to hopefully attract two commercial tenants, whether it's bringing back someone who was previously at the plaza or finding a new commercial tenant.
Kevin, can you speak to what the current pilot agreement terms are?
Yes, so it's a 20-year pilot. Well, as it says on here, it's a 20-year pilot that starts at $60,000 with a 2% increase, but then it has a 10-year extension component as long as the building is in compliance with zoning, taxes, etc.
So essentially a 30-year pilot.
But yeah, essentially it will be 20 plus 10, I guess, or 30-year pilot on that same 2% with the 2% escalator continuing for years 21 through 30.
This is going from 10,000 commercial square feet to a third of that, and we're still looking at doing a 30-year pilot. Again, this project absolutely needs to happen. I'm very excited for it, but this is a pretty substantial change in my mind in the commercial, because if this was purely 100% apartments, would we even be having this conversation? I mean, would we even be offering a pilot? We've had a few of them that have offered up around the county that are just residential, and they never came before us. Again, I think this project needs to happen. I'm excited about it, but that seems like a pretty substantial change on the commercial side of the mixed-use project.
But it's also a combination with the affordable housing, which is another component of consideration for the pilot. So if it was a full market rate, to kind of answer your hypothetical question, if it was a full market rate apartment building with no commercial space, it would typically not be pilot eligible unless there was some other compelling reason, maybe reuse of a whole building or something. Kevin, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's accurate. The other, I guess, arguably with the decrease in the project scope, and the pilot payment or schedule remaining the same, arguably you could make the argument that the scope of that project, that the tax revenue generated from it isn't going to change. I mean, arguably, I suppose, in a similar project, maybe it would be a different, a lower payment, for instance. But I think it still qualifies from general municipal law perspective and all the rest as a project that is entitled to seek financial assistance from the agency.
Well, I don't think anyone's saying throw it out. I was more just saying, I think substantially, at a 10,000 square foot project of commercial space, you're gonna have all that sales tax revenue, you're gonna have the job creation. I think that and I don't know if you recalculated or if the council recalculated the effect of this project financially to the area, but it seems like it's reduced, at least just in reading the numbers.
It's still a big project.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but how many commercial buildings or commercial customers in 3,200 feet? I mean, I just wanted to pick up what you were talking about.
He's thinking too. I mean,
Lucky to get one.
I'd say one maybe two,
Yeah.
but, that's not a
That's
lot
all.
of commercial space. The commercial space is all on the first floor?
Yes.
I mean, it's obvious that if they didn't have the commercial, they wouldn't qualify.
Well, is it, I don't, is that true, if there was no
With the,
commercial
all
space?
affordable housing, he's saying they would.
I think that does add a component to it. That if it were just an affordable housing project, I believe that it could still meet the criteria for financial
Looks like
assistance.
Champlain Commons.
That, yeah, it
Right.
says that was all housing.
Mhm.
Chris, one, question I've got is, you're going from, 72 total apartments to 70.
Right.
But you're doing a dramatic decrease on the parking spaces. Is that gonna, be enough for the apartments and everything?
It is, and one thing home leasing does is they have a parking study that shows how, similar buildings of theirs, how the parking is utilized.
Mhm.
And yes, it's ample parking.
If it didn't, zoning would pick that up anyway.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's being addressed in the zoning context. There's actually a plot of land that's being maintained as green space, but if there was ever a need for additional parking, that could be converted fairly easily into additional parking. The developer also committed to reserving a number of public parking spaces for the surrounding businesses and property owners and the municipality. That's being figured into this as well. So I think from the zoning perspective, if I could wear that other hat for a minute, it is going through the process. There hasn't been anything identified as a problem or that I don't believe is going to give any cause for concern. That anticipate that the planning and zoning approvals will be granted, as Chris said, by February 4th.
Thanks, Kevin. Morris?
Kevin, if I understand this correctly, on the property boundaries, the businesses that are on Bridge, right now, the existing ones that are on the bridge side, they're not part of that project? On that be on the south side of the property?
No, I mean, this will be a complete demolition of what's there now, Midtown Plaza, and then a rebuild.
Right.
I think you got some up the
The
other
businesses that I'm talking about are the ones that are on the, right now, on the existing.
Northleaf building?
Well, the
Yes.
ones right on Bridge.
Okay, yeah, right, that corner property, the old Niagara Mohawk building, which is now owned by the Northleaf family, that's going to remain intact and will be separate and distinct from.
That's what I'm trying to say,
East Lake
to
Commons.
identify the boundaries of this new project.
Yeah.
The existing businesses that are on.
Correct, yeah, there's a commercial space there, I think there's at least 2, maybe 3 tenants potentially there. Those are separate and distinct from this project, that won't be impacted by this project.
Okay, that's what I wanted.
In fact, the redesign of this project actually improves some of the concerns that were raised by that property owner during the first zoning meetings.
I wanna go back to what you were saying about several, on-street parkings dedicated to this project?
Well, it's off-street parking within the parking lot. So there's
Dedicated
gonna
to
be
the city?
municipal, designated municipal parking.
Okay.
If I could ask about, because I haven't seen the revised drawings, without the without the parking deck, that offered access from Second Street, at this point, is there gonna be a wall there, is it all gonna be First Street level parking?
Yes, it's all gonna be First Street level parking. I can get you the plan, but essentially it's gonna be graded up to, that higher level, and it's gonna be grass hopefully, I believe.
So will there be parking access to the Second Street businesses? Because I know that was one of the things that in the original plan, the Second Street businesses were gonna be able to utilize that parking. That was a piece that we had talked about. Will there still be parking on Second Street? Is that?
Well, yeah, I mean, there will be public parking along Second Street like there is now.
Okay.
None of that would change. The entrance, the only entrance, I believe, and exit is off of Cayuga Street.
Okay.
So it removes any impact to First Street and Bridge Street
Got it.
that there is now, or was. I think it's all pretty much closed down now, but all traffic will flow in and out of Cayuga Street.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Chris or Kevin or Kevin?
Nothing else from me.
All right, we have a motion and a second, all those in favor?
Real quick question,
What?
is this at all, this vote is just purely on keeping the terms of the current pilot the same, just essentially changing the name of the awardee with the understanding of what the changes in the project are?
Yeah, this resolution approves the project modification, so the description of the project would change, but all of the terms would remain the same. So the mortgage tax exemption, actually that the exemption benefits are reduced because the project cost is reduced, but fundamentally those exemptions remain in place, sales tax and the pilot payment schedule. It all remains the same. All you're doing is modifying the project description to describe a lesser project, if you will.
And if there are changes required by zoning or anyone else, then would the project need to come back in front of us again, or would this cover that?
I mean, potentially, but we're anticipating that this resolution will cover the changes that will ultimately be approved through the zoning as well.
And have you, obviously there was a public informational piece when we first awarded this. Have you reached back out to any of the tax authorities? Will they be alerted of the change? Is there any sort of concern?
We're not required, the IDA is not required to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Because again, it's the impact is less and the benefits don't change. There's no triggering mechanism that mandates that the IDA, notify any parties. I will say from the zoning perspective that all of the neighboring property owners within so many 100 feet of the project will be notified and have been notified of the zoning changes.
What's the general stance from the city on this?
This is one of the anchor projects of the city's DRI project. Mayor Barlow supports this. I don't think it's too strong to say supports it enthusiastically. I talked to him just yesterday about it. So from the city's perspective, this is a project that they want to see happen.
Okay, any more questions or discussions? Okay, we have a motion and second on the resolution. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, now we're moving to abundant solar power. Kevin, how do you wanna?
I think, first let me review the notes of the public hearing meeting, the public hearing. And then we'll turn it over to Melissa and anyone else who may have comments. Bear with me just a moment. So on Wednesday, on the 15th, the IDA held a public hearing in the town of Albion for this project, at 10 o'clock in the morning, and in your packet, there's 2-page minutes for the meeting. I'd actually like to review those with the board for the benefit of any of our guests to hear the minutes. That meeting lasted just about an hour and 15 minutes, and we had very good attendance. You can see the list of attendees up at the top. About 14 attendees, including myself. All right, I'll just quickly go through this. Melissa Clark, who's here with us today, provided technical and design details of the project. At the request of Mr. Walter, who was one of the attendees, I explained why the agency was considering a deviation from its uniform tax exempt policy, the UTEP, for this project, including the reuse of a closed mining facility, other potential uses of land, and the increased tax revenues provided to the taxing jurisdiction by way of the pilot payments versus the current tax revenues from the land. Additionally, I explained that the pilot agreement was an alternative to the company pursuing full tax exemption for any increase in assessment related to the project for 15 years under real property tax law 487. I stated that the financial assistance would be further discussed at the agency's meeting today, and the meeting is open to the public. Mr. Walter pointed out that the owner of land is required to restore the land after closing the current mine according to terms of the landowner's permit with the New York State DEC. Therefore, he stated that the UTEP justification of reusing a closed mine was not pertinent, disagreeing with the point I had made. Mr. Walter expressed his view that the project does not meet the requirements for a UTEP deviation and that he does not want the town of Albion to be losing out on property taxes. Mr. Walter and others expressed concerns on several occasions that the town had very little time to review the project. It was stated that the first information about the proposed project was contained in the agency's deviation letter dated December 26, 2019. And just to add some color to that, the town has no zoning and no planning process in the town of Albion, so there wasn't a related planning process where there would have been other public notices and other public hearings.
So there's no permitting necessary for this?
There will be a building permit with no site plan approval required. There will be a stormwater prevention plan, but no town process.
Excuse me, is it, when they talk about it being a gravel bed, is that brought up to level of the land, surrounding land?
As I understand things, the mining permit that's in place with the owner of the property, the requirement, each mining permit may have different requirements for the restoration at the end of the permit. In this case, the requirement is to bring it to level ground. Yeah.
Can we just let Kevin go?
Yeah, let me
through the
continue and then
public hearing, and then we'll open it up.
Because some of your
and
questions may be
discussions.
covered, and the board has these minutes in their hands. Mr. Walter opined that the tax income accrued to the town with a 15-year rather than a 20-year pilot would far exceed the proposed pilot payments in years 16 through 20. Ms. Clark explained the depreciating value of solar installations as the productivity of the panels decreases with age. An attendee expressed that the benefits all go to the company in years 16 to 20. Because the pilot, to explain that, the pilot that's proposed up for discussion is a 20-year pilot. The real property tax law exemption is 15 years. Our other deviations in our UTEP policy to call for a 15-year pilot for certain things. This proposal is a 20-year pilot. Mr. Carrick, who's with us here today, pointed out that the pilot will increase revenues to the town compared to the current tax income. An attendee suggested a 10-year pilot would be more acceptable. Mr. Carrick explained that a 20-year pilot gives certainty of payment to the developer, which is a project attribute that developers require. An attendee expressed his concern that a majority of the benefits go to the company and little to the town. He further pointed out that the company is not purchasing its own substation, instead relying on National Grid equipment infrastructure that is paid for by the ratepayers in the region. Ms. Clark informed the attendees that the company will be paying National Grid for engineering studies and upgrades to existing National Grid facilities. She added that the costs imposed on solar development projects by National Grid are sometimes in excess of what a single project can support and therefore make some projects infeasible. Mr. Carrick pointed out that the electricity produced by this project will allow 600 to 1,000 customers in the area to save approximately 10% of the electricity supply part of their National Grid bills. He further commented that this has been estimated to be a total benefit to electricity consumers of approximately $4.5 million. An attendee expressed concern that the agency is participating in projects beyond industrial development, including this project. Several attendees pointed out that the landowner would receive more income from the project than the town through its share of the pilot payments. Mr. Walter discussed the possibility of alternative developments on the land that would generate more tax revenue for the town than a proposed pilot agreement for the project. A discussion of an alternate location previously considered by the company was held between Ms. Clark and several attendees. Attendees offered suggestions of additional alternative locations for the project in the town. A question was asked about whether New York State funds would be used to upgrade National Grid's facilities in order for it to accept the power generated by the project. Mr. Carrick advised that the New York State Public Service Commission does offer funding for upgrading facilities to utility companies such as National Grid. Several attendees at different times made requests that the proposed pilot schedule be adjusted to increase the revenues to the town. Ms. Clark answered a question about the expected lifespan of the solar array. She stated that new generation panels such as would be used in this project have an expected useful life of 30 years. She further explained that the manufacturer warranties that the power generation of each panel will be 80% of the rated capacity in the 30th year of use. Ms. Clark explained the decommissioning plan and bond that will be in place as part of the project. Ms. Clark discussed the recycling methods currently in use in North America for solar arrays and the improved capabilities expected at the end of the useful life of the project. Attendees asked about hazardous materials at the project site. Ms. Clark stated that the proposed panels are inert and do not contain hazardous materials. She further added that the ambient noise outside of the proposed fenced area will not be affected by the project. A discussion about the SEQR process, the environmental assessment form process, was held. An attendee stated that the town should have more input into the approval of a project to avoid an undue burden to taxpayers in the town. Mr. Walter made some closing comments about the project and reiterated a number of the points made above. He encouraged the agency to consider the comments made at the public hearing when considering the approval of the project. So those are the minutes from the public hearing. Some of the points in the minutes were made multiple times. I noted that on a few occasions. Gary was in attendance. And Gary, do you have any other comments about
No, I
the
think you
public hearing?
covered this very well, Kevin. I mean, these pretty much sums up a lot of the questions and statements made by the people in attendance of the public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Very nice job. So how do we want to proceed with this?
Do we have anyone any guests who are interested in making comments or asking questions about the project?
Yeah.
And Melissa also may want to say a few words, but maybe you could go ahead.
Again, Lorraine Burrows, the school business administrator for the APW Central School District. The concerns, the board president was in attendance at the public hearing on Wednesday. And in his report back to the district for what the impact for the district will be is that the proposed percentage for the tax revenues that will be shared amongst the town and the school district was unclear for the school district to make proper arrangements for what we're about to do is to look at our property tax cap for setting next year's 2021 budget. So if any materials can be shared with the school district for the amount of revenue that will be actually benefiting the school district, that would be greatly appreciated. There was some confusion in the original letter that was provided to the school district indicating that the UTEP property was tax exempt when it actually generated revenue for
There was a
the school
mistake in
district.
that letter, correct. Yeah. The current taxes are about $1,400 per year.
Okay,
I understand.
thank you
Yeah.
for stating
Yeah.
that. So the impact to the school district of losing out, or again, I don't have any indication as to what the new number will look like, so I don't wanna color that comment, but if $1,400 is what the school district was getting, I'd like to know what.
And that's total.
That was
taxes.
total.
The
You
school,
get a percentage
the
of
school
that.
portion in 2019 is $663 for the school.
Thank you for those clarifications, that's
Sure.
what I was curious about in coming today to try to figure out, again, the impact to the school district. A final comment or question that I may have is that should a project scope come in and decrease, as we just reviewed with a different proposition, what is the likelihood that the full amount of the revenue would be recognized at the 5 megawatts versus the 1 megawatt, and the impact that it would have?
Yeah,
As a
that's a good
result,
question.
so-
And maybe
And how would we then be notified as a school district to again let us know that we're going to have decreasing revenue from the pilot?
if I may, let me first take the question about the information you need about the tax revenue impact of should this pilot agreement get approved. We can, roughly speaking, the school tax is roughly half, slightly less than half of the total tax for the on a property. So if the initial pilot approved is for 5 megawatts at $3,500 per megawatt to 17,500, you would have approximately half of that. I can follow up with you and get you a specific calculation on that. And then there's a proposed 2% increase over the life of the proposed 20-year pilot, so that would increase annually by 2%, and your share would, of course, increase as well. And then every year, what we do, for your information, is we calculate. So if we have a pilot, the IDA has a certain amount of pilot income on a piece of property, we look at the tax rates of the different jurisdictions. So your tax rate, the school district's tax rate may go up or down in varying, like,
I
a
have
little
9
bit differently
towns
than
in
the
my-
towns,
Yeah,
you
I
know.
have 9 towns in the district.
You're right, so that split between the tax will change over the years. And what we do is every year get the new tax rates at this time of year, at the first of the year, and calculate the proportional split of those pilot payments. So you'll always get a split of the pilot payment that's in proportion to your tax rates versus the town and county combined tax rate.
So do you average my 9 towns' tax rates? Or you take
We look at
Within-
properties in that,
individual town that
within
it
that town.
resides in? the
within that
of
town,
Richland?
correct, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely, yeah. And then, so the split of the 17.5 could vary slightly depending on whether the town and county tax rates are increasing as a percentage of the total tax rate for the property, or not.
So that's saying the school would receive quite a bit more money.
Correct, yeah, I mean, assume it's half, it's roughly half, so,
8,000
yeah,
instead of
eight-
660.
yeah, exactly. In year one, and then the 2% increase is kind of guaranteed, regardless of what the school's tax rates do. Although the school's tax rate could change the mix between town
Understood.
and school.
Do you have any more questions or comments you want? Feel free anytime, if you hear something else,
Okay, thank you.
just let us know, okay?
And I'll follow up with you on a specific calculation of that
Okay.
after the meeting.
Did we want to address the other question that was raised about what if the scope of the project changes?
Yeah, I just wanna check, Herb, are you here for this project, or?
Yes, I just was concerned, I'm a legislator too, which both Richland is the owner of the property and Albion it's in Albion, so.
Correct.
I observed your video conference already.
Good.
And I know there's concerns about the residents in Elmar. And,
Yes,
you said you addressed that, and I see you are addressing that, and I just wanna make sure that their concerns are met and taken into consideration. I know some are not happy with it, and in reversed, town of Richland is happy, so it's
Sure.
kind of a tit for tat, I guess, but.
Personally, I was very pleased to see the turnout at the meeting and very happy to have the feedback, because there's often we go through on projects and we really don't have that public input, so it was very important to us to get it. I'm glad we did, I'm sure the board will consider it.
And another thing that I pointed out at the meeting, they were very respectful with their questions and comments and stuff, they did a very good job, so.
I thought their questions were very good.
Oh, yeah.
They knew a lot more about that than I did.
So this is
So,
in 2 towns?
It's in the town of Albion, but the property is owned by the town of Richland.
It was their former
Oh,
gravel
it was
pit.
their gravel bed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
They've owned it for several years.
So Richland, as the landowner and lessor, right, the landlord, is leasing the property to the company to put the solar arrays on. So they'll receive a fee of
A lease payment.
a lease payment for for a period of time, and the town will receive its portion of the pilot payment should the
Town of Albion.
town of Albion should the project be approved.
So Aaron had mentioned the potential another use for the land. Was there one identified or?
No, nothing specific. It was a discussion about the location of the land being located where one of the main snowmobile trails crosses the road there, and the idea that I think the primary concept was either a very nice house or some business related to snowmobiling that could go on that location. But I'm not aware of any stated interest or anyone else looking to use that land. I don't know.
There was
You
nothing
know,
specific
yeah.
mentioned.
So
It was
from a
all-
residential aspect, as far as the good for the school or the town, this generates far more
We did some.
revenue than.
What-
a
Yeah,
residence
and
would.
to your point, Barry, that came up in the meeting, kind of combined with that discussion about alternative use. And it was mentioned that possibly a $300,000, in the meeting, it was mentioned possibly a $300,000 house would generate the same revenue for the town, but we went back after the meeting and looked at the tax rates. And if we look at the total tax rates for that piece of property, it's $32.154 per thousand. So in order to generate 1,000 or 17,500 in year one, it would need a property with an assessment of 545,000 to get the total taxes, which of course the town would get its share. The average of the pilot payments over the proposed 20 years in the proposed payment is $21,260. In order to generate that much tax, we'd have to have an average assessment over that period of $665,000. So that's a high assessment in the town of Albion. And if it was a business related to snowmobiling, it's a seasonal business. You know what those are up there. But that was part of the discussion of the alternative use, whether an alternative development or investment could generate more tax revenue for the town, and all the taxing jurisdictions than than this pilot.
And they also talked about that they didn't have enough time or something to review. Is that something we should consider?
Well, again, we complied, the IDA complied with the general municipal law notice requirements, so those were met. I think part of the challenge, and as Kevin mentioned, is that there is no other notice requirement. A lot of times, a company will reach out to the town because they need zoning approval or site plan approval. In this case, Albion doesn't have either zoning or any type of site plan approval, so there was no, initial or preliminary ask, right? The only thing that the town issues is a building permit, and that typically happens after a project's approved and you've got all of your engineering and you go into the building inspector and get your permit. So, certainly sensitive and empathetic to that, but the IDA can only do what it does with respect to notice requirements, and we met those requirements. The other issue, if I can just take a minute, so we're clear on the record, there was, Kevin's minutes mentioned that there was a discussion on seeker, and why wasn't the town notified of seeker provisions? This particular action that the IDA is undertaking is subject to the State Environmental Quality Review Act. There is a seeker resolution like there is for every project. This particular project is classified as an unlisted action. There's 3 types of actions under seeker. There's type 1, type 2, and an unlisted. Type 1 action requires the most rigorous environmental review. A type 2 action doesn't require any review, and an unlisted requires a review, but it's not necessarily coordinated with other approving agencies. So, as Kevin mentioned, there's because the DEC is required to do a stormwater pollution prevention plan. They have their own separate environmental review. NYSERDA has a hand in this. They do their own separate environmental review. The IDA has approval authority. It does its own separate review. If the town had zoning or site plan approval, they would do an environmental review. That's for an unlisted action. If it were type 1, if it were big enough to trigger a type 1 action, then the IDA would be required to coordinate that environmental review with all of the agencies involved. But this was an unlisted action. The reason it's an unlisted action is because, frankly, it doesn't fit any of the criteria for a type 1 action. The one that's closest, that you could argue possibly triggers the type 1 is that a project or action involves the physical alteration of 10 acres. Now, this is a 28 plus or minus acre site, but the actual physical alteration of the land is minimal. It's less than an acre, because what the company is doing is driving stakes essentially in the ground, and they're creating pads for the not generators, but transformers. All of that takes up less than an acre of land, right? So that's one aspect. The town issuing a building permit is a type 2 action. It doesn't even require an environmental review. And this arguably could have been a type 2 action under the new seeker laws, because the state legislature enacted new regulations that went into effect last year, dealing specifically with solar energy arrays that involve 25 acres or less of physical alteration. But there's certain criteria: closed landfills, brownfield sites, etc. This doesn't quite meet that characterization. Otherwise, this would have been a type 2 action and no environmental review at all. So there was no requirement for the IDA to coordinate an environmental review with the town or anyone else, and so that's yet another, I guess, reason why the town didn't learn about this until they received the deviation notifications.
And together with that, one of the points made at the meeting was for other projects, the town had received this coordinated review efforts on the seeker, but since it wasn't required in this case, that didn't occur. So that was one of the questions.
Yeah, I mean,
So is a seeker gonna,
a seat,
gonna
yeah,
be done?
yeah, it's part of our packet. It's a short environmental review. It's been reviewed by staff and
Oh, it's
there will
been
be
done, the same,
the
short form.
There will be a recommendation
Okay.
to adopt a negative declaration because we have not identified any moderate to large impacts, environmental impacts on the land if this project were to go forward.
But a short form's been completed.
Yes.
It's a full, actually.
Sorry?
It's a full form.
It is
Oh,
a
it
full
is?
form, but it's
That was the short version.
Oh,
The company put together a long form, but it is clearly a unlisted action that
requirement for sure.
Got it.
triggers a short environmental assessment form.
Kevin, thank you very much, I think you detailed it very well. Chris, Melissa, if you.
We have the open question, I think,
Yeah.
and among other things, Melissa, if you'd like to say.
Yeah, I think the question with respect to the scale of the array and how that might be impacted. As soon as we get site control, or in this case signed a lease with the town of Richland, and that was in late October of last year, we would then apply formally to the utility for an interconnection review. We have done that. That process takes about 90 business days to come back to us and say, we can either do this or we can do this, and the cost to you will be X number of dollars for a feeder improvement or a substation upgrade or whatever the requirements are to bring the local infrastructure up to grade for an infusion of 5 megawatts of power. So we wait until we see that number because it can, to a previous point made, de-steer the project. So they could come back to us and say, by all means, connect 5 megawatts, but it's going to cost you $2 million. And that would break the back on the current business model. So then we would sit down with the utility and back it down to what scale we could actually accommodate financially. And so we may come back and say, after receiving the interconnection information and meeting with the utility, we'll be backing this off to 2 megawatts or 1.8 megawatts or something. There tends to be a threshold for equipment improvements around about that space, depending on what's already there. We may come back and say, unfortunately, this is going to be a smaller array, and the implications would be the tax abatement would thus be less. Our NYSERDA grant would thus be less. Everything would just back down. So we'll be seeing that, I would think before the end of the first quarter. So probably if we applied in November, late February, March. I think, most of the other points were covered. We had in fact been working with the town of Richland on identifying an appropriate site to create a solar array for them. They had been working with Chris and CNY, Regional Planning and Development Board, for a couple of years prior to our selection. And they had identified a couple of other sites that we had actually been looking at. So the actual mine site didn't crop up until maybe early summer, and I think because it was just coming to end of life, and somebody probably raised their hand at the table in the town of Richland and said, this is no longer going to be useful to us, we should find another use for it. So to address the previous point about timing, I actually reached out to the supervisor at the town of Richland in the last couple of weeks when Aaron reached out to me just to make sure that I hadn't missed something over 2 years of discussion about another site. And he told me that there had never been any discussion about another use, there had never been any approach for any other purchases or options, and that the lease that we have signed with Richland was by far and away the best opportunity for the town of Richland to generate revenue against that site. So that's kind of how we got to where we are.
Can I address one point that was made in this,
Before I start, Nick, Chris, did you have anything to add to that you wanted to share with the board?
Not really, I think we've covered it. I would just remind the board, as I said in my previous presentation, that the reason why our agency is involved with these municipalities at all is to try to direct solar development away from some of the greenfield and very scenic viewshed opportunities that have been proposed by other developers towards sites where we think, as a planning agency, it makes a lot more sense. And so we believe this site fits that criteria, as does many of the other municipal landfill sites that we've looked at. This may not technically be a brownfield, but when you think about a reclaimed gravel pit, that's a tough, I think, development site in terms of building foundations and so forth. So we think this is a good use of what you could say is a derelict property.
And it's also from a viewshed perspective, it's not going to impact folks. Sometimes we build an array and we'll have a couple of farms that will be in full view of the array. And beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Some folks don't find these particularly beautiful. There's naturally occurring tree lines, and there's a lovely band of trees between the roadbed and what's currently the mine facility. Mature trees that can stay because of how they're positioned vis-a-vis the table positions. Tables are typically south-facing. So to Chris's point, we're really thrilled with this site because we think it's an improved use on that previous mining opportunity, and that it gives continuity to benefit for a broader group of people.
Okay, what I'd like to do is take a motion in a second and then open it up for discussion for any of our guests. And if you have comments you'd like to make, you're welcome to make it if you heard something that maybe triggered another question. So right now I'll take a motion in a second on the,
I'll make a motion.
okay, motion by Tim,
On the
second.
On what? On what? Motion second
Oh,
on
that's
what?
right, we gotta do the secret resolution.
On the secret.
Yeah.
And then who?
I'll second this motion on the secret.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the seeker. Any questions or discussions on the seeker? Any comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second on the seeker. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, a motion on this inducement resolution.
I'll move it.
We have a motion and a second on the inducement resolution,
You second?
or second, I'm sorry.
I'll second it. I'll get you off the hook.
Need a second. Okay, we have a motion and a second on the inducement resolution.
I have a question on that.
Any, okay, and open it up for questions?
Yep, if I could, if the project does substantially change, reducing the amount that would be paid to the taxing authorities, is there a requirement that in itself would require us to discuss it again, or based on the fact that this is billed per megawatt, would we not even see it again?
No, the project is, what you're inducing is a project based on 5 megawatts.
Okay.
Right, and so much acreage of land and whatnot, so
Okay.
a change, a scale down, to 1 to 2 megawatts would require,
Okay.
So they would be coming back for the pilot and the.
Yeah, most
Why
definitely.
would that require, when the one previous one, because that was dropped down, didn't require anything? So why would this change, if it drops down, require another motion?
Because it's based on, the way that the pilot schedule is formulated. It's, based on megawatt, and so they would be requiring or be asking for a lesser of a pilot payment. The other project, the pilot payment remained the same.
Okay,
Okay, so
makes sense, good, alright, understand it, thanks.
Okay, any other questions or comments on the inducement resolution? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, the pilot resolution, do I have a motion on the pilot resolution?
I'll move it.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
A motion and a second on the pilot resolution, any comments, questions, or anything?
Maureen, did you have any other comments or questions?
I have no
We'll follow up on that calculation.
Thank you.
I've got a comment, if I could. One of the questions that was raised, in this previous meeting was the fact that the town of Richland's gonna make more money off of this project than the town of Albion. It's common practice for someone who owns a commercial piece of property to lease it for more than the tax rate on the property. So, I don't think that argument really justifies, doing anything to stop this project from going forward. The town of Richland owns the property, they legally own the property, they have the right to develop it, and they don't have any mechanism for stopping that in the town of Albion. It's not our place to stop a project based on, zoning or anything along those lines, so.
Benefits financially.
Right, so if the property owner, whether it's the town of Richland or it was John Brown's farm, own the property, if they have the right to lease the property for whatever they can lease it for, and the tax rate is the tax rate, and, I think the reflection of the fact that there could potentially be zero taxes on the property for the first 15 years, I don't see how the town could possibly benefit more than they're gonna benefit from this agreement, so that's just my two
No, I would
cents.
agree. My take on it is also, we can weigh how much they're benefiting, both of them. What we're seeing that is they're both benefiting.
It's a positive.
The fact that one benefits more than the other, well, I'm not as concerned about that, as long as both folks are, and I think it's an argument
And the
that
school
both,
district's benefit.
yeah, all taxing authorities are being benefited pretty much by what, a factor of, what, almost 10?
A little over 10, almost 12 times, yeah.
Or did you have anything else you wanted to add, or any other questions, comments on?
I'd just like to have the tax information that you're gonna give to her for
Yeah.
a copy.
Well, they'll do a little sheet on it that shows the, by year, can do that, by year, the current tax rates, how it would be split out by the town, county, and school district. And get that to both of you. I'll get your email addresses, you can email that.
So Kevin, you'll do what it's taxed at presently versus what?
Yeah, that's a good comparison, that's
It's
a
a
good
good
comparison.
comparison to what, what they're receiving now as far as your taxes and everything
Based on the current,
versus what, it will be with abundant power.
Yeah.
Okay?
absolutely.
And I thank you for taking everybody's concerns in consideration.
Thanks, sir. Okay, any other questions or comments on the pilot resolution? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? One opposed?
You made the motion,
Who does that?
I made the motion, Nick seconded it.
and you're,
Doesn't matter who makes it.
Yeah. Okay, so lastly is a final approving resolution. Do I have a motion on that?
I'll make a motion.
Tim, do I have a second? Morris, I have a motion and a second on the final approving resolution. Any comments or discussions on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, abundant power. And I wanna thank you, everybody, for showing up and sharing their comments and questions with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
Kevin's doing it.
Oh, okay, yeah, perfect, thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Okay, on to 7, ASA Volley New York Solar.
Yep, that's on me. So let me first address the next 3 agenda items in general. We have 3 new solar project applications that have been presented to the agency. They've been reviewed by staff and by Kevin and by our special counsel. So they're qualified applications to seek financial assistance, as other solar projects have been in the past. Today, we're not necessarily approving anything with the pilot or the payment schedule or the term of the pilot. We're basically qualifying that it is we're a resolution that it is a project under the definition of the GML. So that's what we're up to today. I'll give a brief of this project.
Yes, please.
Can you, real quick before you can you just give a very brief explanation of what allows it? I guess the question, what would make it not eligible for this type as a solar project in general? 'Cause I know we do mention that it is
Right.
eligible, what would make it non? It seems like all of them have been, are we not seeing the ones that aren't, or is it a pretty low bar to be eligible?
In a solar project particular, Tim, or?
Yeah, specifically,
Yeah.
have there been some that have, looked to us and we haven't been able to because they've been ineligible, or is it?
No, everyone we've seen has been eligible.
Oh, this is saying it's an eligible project compared to building a quick fill or something.
Correct.
This isn't saying one solar against another
So,
solar.
solar projects are projects that would essentially automatically qualify for this financial assistance. Part of the challenge, there is an opting out provision within the state law, and certain municipalities can't opt out of the requirements of the real property tax laws of 487. A lot of times the solar companies will seek the benefits from the IDA because it creates more cost certainty for them, right? And
As opposed to waiting till the 15th year and then getting hit with a.
Right.
$3 million assessment, and now their
Yeah.
their taxes are more, well, the last 5 years than they would have been.
Yeah, and there's also the town can opt out at any time, so the town could opt out in the middle of a planning process where the company may have already spent significant money with National Grid on their own engineering costs and legal fees and time, of course, so the town could opt out in the middle of a process, so at this point, Abundant Solar has left the room knowing that their resolutions have passed, so they have certainty, and they could write a check to National Grid or spend more money on their own engineering with some confidence that they have a certainty of this payment at
Makes
least.
sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
So what we're looking for now is a motion have we made a motion yet for this resolution?
No.
Can we get a motion and a second for the initial resolution, and we can have some discussion on this?
I'll move it.
First motion by Barry, second? Second by Len or Tim?
I could give a few comments about the project.
Yeah.
Okay, right, so all you see on your agenda is the ASA Balmy New York Solar One LLC, that will be the owner of the project. It's being developed by AMP Solar Development Incorporated, which is in Mississauga, Canada. They have a company in the United States called Omni Navitas LLC in Boston. It's a property on the corner of County Road 6 and Gilbert Mills Road, which is a little hard to, if you don't know exactly where that is, it's a little hard to say, but it's directly east of the city of Fulton, basically in the same line heading directly east on County Route 6. It's a 25-acre project size is proposed for the 5 megawatts, which is more or less in line with what we've seen. It's currently a farm. There's some farm buildings on the property. It's a 72-acre parcel. And Town of Volney will be the lead agency for seeker.
So they're using 25 acres, but it's a 72-acre parcel, is it?
Yes,
And
and
they're buying the whole parcel, or are they subdividing it, or?
There's no plan to subdivide it at this time. And there are improvements, and this I think my suggestion is we do discuss this perhaps now or perhaps when we're looking at the pilot resolution, but there are other improvements on the property as well. There's farm buildings, there's a pole barn, there's multiple pole barns in this case actually. And yeah, so
I don't know that this is the point to have these discussions as to the shape of the pilot or anything like that, but this seems like a piece of property that's gonna have a higher assessment than the one we just.
currently it's assessed at $182,000. The current taxes are $4,466, and namely because of the size and the improvements.
So down the road, this is the initial, when we get down the road, we need to have that discussion.
sure.
I think we do, yes.
Yeah.
Especially given, two things. The difference between the project size and the parcel size, but also the fact that there are usable, these aren't dilapidated barns, these are usable sort of modern pole barns and different things on the property that would continue to be used by the property owner after the solar farm's developed, based on how I understand their site plan.
Yeah, and that's gonna be a function of the assessing unit, in this case, the town, and coordinating that with the town assessor. There may be a carve out of, whatever acreage the solar arrays sit on.
So we did in Pulaski, something similar.
Something similar to that, either there or up in, I think Sandy Creek.
Yes.
Yeah, Howland Farm.
So, that's my guess, is that we'll end up carving out a portion that will be wholly exempt, and then the balance will be, continue as exempt, or, taxable as, excuse me, likely agricultural property.
Prorate their assessment down, there would be taxed at normal rates
Right.
based on the acreage split or something, or some other method, and then
Yeah.
pilot would apply to the rest.
Thanks, Sam.
So this initial resolution is just getting the meeting going and.
Yeah, so in this
public
case,
hearing.
right, public hearing, and we'd have to send deviation letters to the taxing authorities, because this is a UTEP deviation, as all solar projects actually are, so.
Yeah, and that's an important part. Virtually every one of these solar projects is gonna be a deviation, just because of what we just went through, the economics of it, the need for some certainty, and then the general going rate for a per megawatt, payment, right, for the taxing jurisdiction. And everyone's gonna try to grab as much, frankly, as they can, in terms of length of time and lower cost per megawatt, but I think ultimately this agency is gonna have to make a decision, you know, with consistency, you know, where we're gonna fall. We just approved a project with a $3,500 per megawatt annual pilot payment. You're gonna, I think these, and Kevin will go through it, but they're varying.
Yeah, the proposals
are varying.
Yeah, the ask is varying, yes, exactly, Nick. In this case, it's 20 years at 3,000 per megawatt. We have approved projects with those terms in the past. And these companies, from talking to them, they watch what we've approved, of course. We'll talk about the other two when we hit those agenda items. They're different asks.
I just wanna bring up one point as a farmer. These companies are soliciting farms all over the place
Are they?
to promote this type of thing. So you get people that wanna retire, they got a small farm, they want to lease this land out to the solar, they stay on the farm and, you know, it's all part of a plan that has gone on with the farming industry, especially your small farms. And some of these dairy farms who've had a rough time and even exist, have got these small farms, and this way is one of the ways of staying on the farm, so to speak.
Well, I mean, from the developer's perspective too, it's a clean site. It's virtually all the trees are removed. I mean, it's ready to go for solar array. If they can supplement the farmer's income with those lease payments, then, you know, from the developer's perspective, it's a win-win.
That's why we're getting more of these, because there's companies going around soliciting farmland.
But this is a different ask than the last one by $500.
Yes, correct. Which I agree with Kevin's point, that I think the agency needs to establish a standard at some point. Whether it's
Seems like there was
documented.
a lot of conversation
or-
around the $3,500 when we were doing it, maybe, I don't remember it right, but.
We had some that were even higher than
3,000,
that, right?
the two in Sandy Creek were 3,000.
They were 3,000.
Yeah. We've gone below 3.
Was there one that was higher though? I thought there was a,
Richland was,
like a 4 or 5.
I think it was 5 for 2 megawatt, I believe.
Is that something we could put together?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
that'd be
I'm
great
sure
to
will.
see.
It needs to be
Kinda
done.
goes,
Mhm.
yeah, size and.
I don't have that
Okay.
today, but.
Would this be the point though where we would need to alter that, or we could alter that at any point?
We
really,
can
before
all,
finalize?
yeah, I mean, I think as these projects become more and more prevalent, we're seeing, we've got, I think, 5 or 6 of them actively in the hopper right now. And the reason that's happening is because the state has made a commitment to introduce up to 7,000 megawatts of additional, you know, green power, if you will, to the grid, and so there's incentives for these programs to happen
Is this happening all over the state?
all over the state. Yeah.
That's what I hear from the developers as well.
Like I say, it's the soliciting of these farms is exposed to a lot of land.
So, you know, and again, it's 7,000 megawatts, and we've, in our 6 projects, if they're all approved, that's maybe 20 to 30, right? So you can see where this is going.
So, we've got a motion and a second on the table for the initial resolution. Any more comments or questions or anything like that?
Is there any sort of concern? And I don't know this the place that wouldn't be this resolution to talk about it, but as we start to see more and more and more of these coming over the next, and we've seen, well, I mean, we'll probably have 10 of them over 3 years, if we're just looking at it. It's gonna be a lot of our county land that's covered with these things that have a 30-year lifespan. It'll be interesting to see what happens 20 years from now, yeah, but.
Well, again, the way that these are being designed, the ones that I've been involved in from a municipal attorney perspective and site planning and zoning and whatnot, they are primarily, they drive, piles, it's just poles, and they erect them, and they're designed to be removed at the end of their useful life. The only area that is really disturbed is generally so many feet by so many feet. It's not big, maybe 10 by 20 for the transformers.
Concrete pad though.
That's really all it is a concrete pad. So it's the impact is very minimal to the land, and they're designed to be pulled up at the end and recycled and the land restored. Well, right, it certainly can be replaced.
Well, I'm more thinking, once these 20 years run out, and the towns and villages have been, right, so that assessment's not staying where it is right now, it's gonna be going. So now all of a sudden, you got 20 years run out, you've got no tax coverage, and you've got an assessment of whatever it is. Just be curious to see if we start seeing those again coming in here to do expansion projects or something. Just, if you're looking at the long term of that property, it's owned by a company who's looking to make money, just something, we won't have to worry about it for another 20 years. Gary will have to worry about it for sure, but just curious. But I'm good.
One quick question. This town has zoning.
Yes, so town of Oswego will be this
They
lead
will be
agency.
seeing this earlier than
In fact, I think that they've
probably already been involved.
Yes, they are.
Okay.
I think Elvin and Plurmore are the only two that don't at this point. I'm not sure.
So, that said, any more questions or anything on this?
Any questions?
We had the motions, right?
Yep. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Right back to you.
Thank you, Nick. So,
Number 8.
we'll go to number 8, the SSC Scriba
Right.
station.
So this is the second in a series of 3 solar projects up for initial resolution at today's meeting. Scriba and Oswego, SSC Scriba and SSC Oswego are owned by this, or proposed by the same developer, which is Summit Solar Capital out of New York City. The company names you see here are the subsidiaries they set up to own these individual developments. SSC Scriba LLC proposes a 5 AC megawatt solar project. It's on State Route 104. The property touches State Route 104 across from Clearview Fireplace and Patio. It's kind of behind the Champlain Commons as well. It's back in there. There is a, call it first generation barn, I think is the term, that's in probably not usable condition on the property, but no other improvements. Let's see, it's a $4 million investment, 27.6 acre solar array on a 70-acre piece of property. The current assessment is $70,000. The taxes today are $2,195. The lead agency will be the Town of Scriba Planning Board. And they have proposed a 25-year pilot at $2,500 per AC megawatt, or requested I should say, with a 1.25% annual escalator. But we'll get into that.
That's down.
At the down the road. I'll come up with that summary of what we've approved today. So. And that's basically what I have on the project. Any questions?
I'll move the initial.
Second.
Motion by Len and a second by Tim. Discussion? I think the discussion will be similar to what we've had in the past in the last couple, right?
Yeah. So, town is aware of this one. They're going through the site plan process right now.
They've held a public hearing.
Held a
as part of
public
that
hearing.
process. Mhm.
Yep. They're just going through the review process and likely be approved in maybe next month or the March meeting. And similar to what Melissa mentioned, this company's going through the National Grid process too. They've made their application to Grid. They're under that 90 to 120 day study period to find out what it's gonna cost them. If you recall, I think there was a prior project, I don't know if it got to the IDA or not, Cypress
It
Creek.
never made it.
Right, cause they got a price tag that wasn't,
Couldn't get to the
It was
bridge.
the same. piece of
same
land,
exact
right?
property, yep, different configuration, but the same exact property, and, you know, that was probably 5 years ago now. The costs were prohibitive for that company. This company is aware of it, but they're taking another shot at it.
Are they working with CNY Regional Planning as well?
No,
So CNY Regional Planning did a RFP, and they've selected Bull Rock Solar, or sorry, Abundant Solar, pardon me, to be their basically their partner in these developments. So they only work with Abundant
Oh,
Solar.
okay.
Yeah, particularly, but their focus is municipally owned properties that are looking for reuse where there are limited other reuse. There's limited other reuse potential, like Chris mentioned.
They're not doing as
closed
much with the
landfills
private-
and things.
private.
No, Central New York Regional Planning isn't at this time.
Just more interesting. I love what they were talking about you know having the tree shields, right?
Yes,
A number.
right.
I'm thinking about a 104 project. I don't know. I assume it'll be visible. I don't know where on the.
actually, this company is making a concerted effort to add view shed protections.
Okay.
So they don't necessarily have to under the town's regulations, but they've committed in the planning board that they are going to actually, well, they're maintaining a pretty good stretch of, you know, woodland, but they're also going to be planting some, I guess, some evergreens or something that's going to further shield the site.
And that'd be more of a planning board issue than an us issue anyway. Just curious. I like to hear that. That's all. And if I can make a recommendation, we just did the initial resolution. I would encourage at that point would be the point where the resident legislator would be alerted. I don't know what the current plan is.
Yeah,
for
we're
that,
going to
but-
copy
okay.
them on the public hearing
Okay,
notice.
perfect. Is that would come at this point, correct?
Yeah, we'll send that out not today, but probably Monday.
Excellent. Thank you.
We have to get it scheduled first, so,
Okay.
it'll be early
Makes
next
sense.
week, let's say, yeah.
Any more questions or comments on this one? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion passes. SSC Oswego.
Number 9, yes.
9.
Go through that, same type of statistics, the same developer, it's a 5 megawatt, another 5 megawatt project. This one is also located on State Route 104, but down just north of the town of Hannibal line. If you know where Terra Animal Hospital is, on the east side of 104, it's the property, it isn't the owner of that practice's property, but it's kind of behind, the array would be behind the practice, sort of, to the behind and to the northeast and to the north of Terra
Yeah,
Animal
there's
Hospital.
farmland.
Terra's on the
It's-
south
it's-
of the
it's in the
road,
Oswego.
isn't it?
Well, okay, right, the road kind of goes north at that point, but yes, I guess what you consider the south side of what we call an east-west road, yes.
Alright.
Yeah, so the property, it fronts both 104 and then the Hannibal town line.
Yeah.
It's a
That kind of wraps
Fox, it's the Fox family.
Alright, so you're saying the road is actually running south of that?
At that point, yeah.
Alright.
You can tell by now. It's also a same project cost, $4,030,000. It's a 34.5 acre project size, a little bigger than the last one. Exactly why that is for the same megawatts, I'm not particularly sure, but it has something to do with the layout of the land, I think. The parcel size is 59 acres. It's currently utilized for farming. There's 2 modern pole barns on the property. The assessment is $74,000. The taxes are $2,798. For later discussion. The town of Oswego Planning Board will be the seeker lead agency. Yeah, that's basically what I have.
This one, to your concern with the view shed,
Mm-hmm.
this will be completely hidden
Yeah.
from the road.
Yeah.
This is the way they lay it in the land.
But their proposal is for the same type of
Yes.
variance?
And together with that, I should say that both by this same developer they will not be asking for sales tax exemption, but they are asking for the pretty big ask on the pilot request.
How low would the sales tax exemption be on that, or how much would it be?
Well, it on a solar project, there's a fair amount of material cost relative to the overall project cost, but the exact ratio, I'm not sure. But on a normal construction project, like Latotro or something, we might assume 50% materials. on a solar project, I've gotta think it must be 2/3 to 75% materials versus 25% labor, so if I'm right about that, say it's a $3 million, material on a $4 million project, then it's 8% of that, so $240,000.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
So giving up a little of the upfront in order to.
I see that
The way it's-
perhaps that's their strategy, that they haven't pitched it to us that way, but it could be, yeah.
Any other comments or questions on this one?
Is that, if I could,
Oh,
is
yeah.
that sales, is that sales tax stays local, or is that gonna be wherever they purchase that product from? How does that work? Is it, if we waive, like, for example, when we waive those sales tax on that side of it, is that in Oswego sales taxes?
They're tax exempt in New York State, so if they bought them out of state, for example, which may be why they're not asking,
Yeah.
they wouldn't apply, but it'd be anywhere in the
Tax
state.
exempt doesn't matter.
Right, so if you're doing a construction project here in Oswego and you buy your boiler down in Syracuse, you're still tax exempt, you know, if we have tax exemption for the idea.
No, I'm saying if we don't have it. So for,
Oh,
I'm trying to figure out how much money
it
we
goes to wherever they
where they
purchase.
buy it,
Yeah, it's
right?
not like, yeah.
So
exactly.
that's not an
Not
Oswego
our-
local,
No, correct.
but if we waive with the pilots, it's Oswego local taxes that are being waived or being
The
adjusted.
real estate,
Oh,
yeah,
exactly.
property
Okay.
tax, yeah,
Yeah.
good point.
Good question. Any other comments or questions?
We're still on the Oswego Solar.
Yes.
Yes.
I just wanted to say thank you for the committees reaching out and giving us communication in the school district. I encourage you to continue that practice, as I see the three that are on here are going to impact other school districts other than APW. So again, thank you for your ability to reach out and communicate with us. It does impact, again, how we are able to levy our taxes, and it creates a little bit of unknown in the taxing, in the community of the taxpayer base of what that means. So just, I'll be trying to help raise awareness in my community to let people know. I have the reverse situation that's happening as well, that I have a pilot that's rolling off of a pilot, so their term has expired. So now that is looking to roll on to my tax levy, which is going to increase the levy, so that's going to make everybody afraid that you're increasing my taxes. Well, I'm increasing the levy, it's for that one taxpayer. So that's the concern, that when people don't understand, what that really looks like. So again, I do appreciate all the communication that you were able to provide to the school district, and please continue to do so.
Thank you for coming.
And the size of that levy impacts your state aid too, doesn't it?
It doesn't impact my state aid, but it impacts, where my revenues come from.
Okay.
So,
Now, one comment I wanted to make to you too, with this, talking about the tax revenue to the school from the project in the town of Albion, as was discussed here, it is possible that those National Grid costs may exceed their budget to be able to do this project, or they may need to come back to us to discuss a 3 megawatt project instead of a 5 megawatt project. So the numbers I send you will be based on the 5 megawatts, but just understand that they may, if this does come to fruition at all, it may change, as you
and
heard
timing
today.
is also crucial. So,
Yeah, which is a little unknown.
so I know the governor had recently passed the legislation that the pilots won't roll on until the next taxing fiscal year, but again, I'm saying that I'm setting a proposition right now that is looking at my tax levy. I'm proposing what my tax cap rate is going to look like, and I'm either including this new pilot or I'm excluding it for the 2021 fiscal year. So
Right.
it's an 18-month projection of what I think is gonna happen by June 30th of 2021. So it's just, I wanted to raise your level of awareness as to what that means for the school districts as well, so
Okay.
I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming down.
Thank you.
Okay, still on number 9, the Oswego, SSC Oswego, all those in favor?
No,
There's been no,
I'll make
it
the
has
Oh, we
been
didn't?
Oh, I
Alright,
thought we moved it.
I thought we did.
No.
I don't have it.
Motion by Tim, second by Barry, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alright, Bull Rock Solar.
Okay,
Rescinding previously
this is-
approved resolutions.
Solar project that keeps coming back.
Which one is this one again?
This is, back in July 2018, we approved a project called Salmon River Solar LLC.
Okay.
And then later, we were informed by the company that the company was selling its assets to Bull Rock Solar. And so we did another approval and another public hearing and another set of resolutions On December, we adopted the initial resolutions on November 20th, 2019, and held a public hearing on December 19th, 2019. For Bull Rock Solar, because the ownership change was required. But now we've been informed that the Bull Rock Solar won't be buying the assets, and rather they'll be buying the membership interest in Salmon River Solar LLC. So we've looked at this with Barclay Damon, with our special counsel, and what needs to be done to support this is to pass a resolution that rescinds the Bull Rock Solar resolutions and reaffirms the Salmon River Solar resolutions that we
Just
passed.
simply just by simply, rescinding the first, would that automatically place us back at the original one?
Yeah,
Essentially.
you're rescinding the second,
Right.
which
Okay.
will
Put you back
replace
to the first
and
one.
get you back to the first. And the scope of the project hasn't changed. It was strictly the membership and the ownership interest of the original applicant.
And my guidance from Barclay Damon is we'll probably see this again. A lot of these solar projects are sort of engineered, and the initial development is done by one company, and then it's sold, or the company sold, the other company is sold. There's a lot of this going on around the state, so it's a familiar territory for Barclay Damon. Yeah, the reaffirmation doesn't change of the Salmon River Solar resolutions doesn't change anything that we approved. It's just kind of formalizing it.
So are we, I guess that was my question, is are we going to be simply rescinding one, or is there gonna be an additional resolution?
No, there's one resolution that does both.
Got it.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Understood.
correct. Good question. So those are my comments about this.
We take a motion and a second on this one?
I'll make it.
Morris, a second.
I'll second.
Harry? Any more discussion or comments?
Yeah, I got a question. Where's this one located?
This one is on South Main Street in Sandy Creek. It's right across the street from the Howland Farm.
Okay.
There's another solar project on there called Howland Solar.
Okay, any more questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Well, opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Okay, thank you very much for running the meeting while I was having some discussions. So move on to 11, the Oswego Civic Facilities Corporation.
Right.
We have an invoice for legal services.
Yes, and we've talked about this at some level before, so now we have an invoice from our council for the work done on the policies that was recently performed for $375. It's those policies are for this Oswego County Civic Facilities Corporation. I propose that the IDA pay this invoice to settle the bill because we don't have any capability to do that in the Civic Facilities Corporation at this time. We don't anticipate any other bills coming from our council or otherwise, so this would be a one-off.
Make the motion.
Can I ask a quick,
Wait a second.
I'll make a second on that, and then can I ask Kevin, Caracoli, and I think we discussed this before, do we have to, how does this have to be worded as such that we're donating $375 to the Civic Facilities Corporation, or how does that work technically?
Well, they have no financials at this point, correct? So
They have no infrastructure to pay it,
Right.
correct, yeah, no bank account, no
How's that?
financials, no.
But this is an expense of that,
Yeah.
that company, not of the IDA, and how does that affect them?
I'll offer one thought on that Kevin could either agree with or not, is that continuing to support the Oswego County Civic Facilities Corporation aligns with the IDA's mission of economic development in the county and maintaining that entity shell at this time for future projects that would be qualified under that, and for this nominal amount.
I have no issue paying the money.
Yeah.
My question is just how does, and not how it affects the IDA specifically, how it
Yeah.
affects the Civic Facilities
Okay,
Corporation.
I think from my perspective, it's not to pass the buck, but it's more of an accounting issue, like how it's expensed. I mean, it's an expense of the
Exactly.
IDA, but whether it's classified donation or some other type of expense or whatnot,
It can't be a donation, because
Well, I know,
Well, yeah,
Usually
just,
makes
it's
work,
a,
but I
the
mean-
point is it's an accounting.
it's an accounting.
But it's not a one-up, right? Because this meeting has to be held at least annually of that facility.
Yeah, but I mean,
But writing all of the policies doesn't have to happen.
right, exactly.
But don't we need legal representation at the board meetings, or do we not?
I mean, you do, but to the extent that there's,
It's a 5-minute board meeting.
Right.
No.
and
Yes,
just by way of example, put myself right on the spot, but I mean, we have Operation Oswego County has a foundation, right? And typically those foundation meetings are held after the executive committee. Teresa, comes in and hasn't recently, but it's all of about a 2-minute meeting, and I never charge for that.
Sure.
So I'm there. I see this as a very similar thing.
Okay.
Now, if there was a particular legal issue that the foundation has had in the past, that requires some time, that might generate a bill. But as Kevin said, I'm not foreseeing an expense like this, which again, just so we're very clear, $375 is probably going to be. That won't be an annual expense, because there won't. This was frankly a requirement that the ABO wanted us, if you recall, to have a whistleblower policy. That's how this all started. The only thing they cared about was a whistleblower policy. And so we adopted it, but in doing that, we also adopted the entire slate of policies that I think brings the Civic Facility Corporation into compliance with the ABO.
Right, and that was where I was going with, if they have no, like you said, infrastructure to handle this, is there any other requirement that the ABO has of that? I think that might be a question more for our next meeting with that, but just I'm saying.
There is, for example, we file, we do what's called a parish reporting for the ABO. It's a lot of zeros,
Right.
Teresa could tell us, but so we comply in that
I was
way.
more thinking, can we set up a process, some sort of formalized MOU or some sort of way where we would then provide that, because you're gonna have to have some sort of staff to do those things, and if you're an auditor, there's not an audit required because of I don't know how
There's
that
no
works.
activity, so there's no.
So,
nothing
but
on
would
it.
there be something that we could just formalize? where
Maybe when we triggered activity.
Yeah, I mean, similar to what the IDA and Operation Oswego County does with an administrative services agreement, you could have something similar, but on a much smaller scale,
Right.
obviously, right? I think that's where you're.
My only
You're
concern
suggesting.
was, does this trigger us to have to do some kind of financial reporting or something, but we're already doing bears reporting, then this will be a part of that, and then that'll be it, I'm assuming.
Well,
Under the IDA.
that's a really good question, because as far as one not-for-profit serving another's expenses, is there some sort of an issue there? Because
I don't think there's an issue with
Okay.
that.
Great. I'm on board then.
Okay, do I have a motion on,
It's been moved and seconded.
oh, that's right,
Tim and,
second, yeah.
Tim and Nick, yeah.
all right, very good. Okay, any more discussion on the invoice for legal services?
So we're going to ask for vote for approval to pay from the
Yes.
County of
Yeah.
Oswego IDA. Pass
Mhm.
invoice, yeah, okay.
So, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, Ken, I wanna get together with you afterwards sometime, just a quick on this civic facilities. So, if I forget, just kinda let me know. Notification of initial allocation, private activity bonds.
We were,
Kevin?
on January 9th, we were informed by the New York State Department of Economic Development that our annual allocation for private activity bonds was $4,126,430. These are bonds that would typically be used to support manufacturing projects. The most recent and last one we did was for the Fulton Companies, Fulton Thermal Corporation in 2010, I think. My memory serves me. We don't do very many. That was a $10 million bond. If we have an opportunity to do bond financing, in that case, we can go to the state and ask for additional allocation. It has to be approved, but we've done it almost every time because this wouldn't be enough to finance, obviously, a $10 million bond. So, but there's a formula they use and they come up with this number. We get it every year.
So that's something we offer to a company that
Yeah,
guys have to do it themselves.
My analysis in my past life told me that a project certainly has to be over $7 million to make the tax exempt bond financing worth it. That had to do with the interest rate, the tax exempt interest rates at the time versus non-tax exempt interest rates, and the fairly extreme upfront cost to get the bond closed.
So is this I don't really understand this, I apologize. So this is something where if someone were to utilize it, we would have less, is it drawn down by a certain amount?
Yeah,
or-
if someone did move forward with, say, a $3 million bond, it would mean we'd have 1.126 left, yeah. But if a company came to us and was qualified for bond financing, we went through that process on a larger bond, we can go to the state and ask for additional allocation. They have a certain amount of unallocated money that covers the whole state that they can approve for different projects, or for different counties, actually.
I would assume they could move it around from, if we don't use it every year, they can move that around and use it somewhere else too, right? If they needed to.
Not exactly sure how that works. It's calculated every year, so I think it's like if we don't use it, it's a fresh allocation.
Right.
Yeah, based on the census data.
Okay.
Okay, so, I've got should I get a
need to do
motion?
anything on
No.
that.
No, it's just information
Oh,
for
just
the board.
information,
It's just an annual update on that we give every January.
Okay. Okay, number 13, the Oswego County Economic Development Planning Committee.
Right, you have a handout in your package under tab 13 for this. It's just, again, an annual update of the county's EDP committee. And Tim, you could give
Yeah,
some words.
if I could, it changed yesterday.
Oh, it did, okay.
It did.
What's the
Yep,
change?
Roy Rehill
Okay,
is not going to be on that committee. Legislator Nate Evans will be
okay,
taking his spot.
right from right here in this.
Yep. Just because of the schedule, the time had moved for one of the other committee meetings. This one is still the first Tuesday at 9 o'clock.
Right.
But because of some other scheduling changes to one of the other committees, it didn't make sense for Legislator Rehill to be able to attend because he comes from Cleveland, which, as he explains it, Cleveland, New York is actually farther away than Cleveland, Ohio. So, but no, it's quite a drive for him, and so it's easier for
It's
him
like
to
existence.
come instead of coming 2 days. He's going to be coming 1 day and staying for
Sure.
2 meetings. So he's switched off. Nate Emmons has offered to serve in his place.
Great, thanks for that update. Appreciate that.
And Legislator Emmons represents what area?
City of Oswego,
City of Oswego?
this west side of Oswego.
Okay, thank you very much, and congratulations, Tim, again on being the chair.
Hey, thank you.
Karen, we need a minute just to organize.
Yep.
Dave, okay, Dave is here, good. Some new guests joining us. Welcome.
Good morning.
Morning, gentlemen. We get new coffee now? I didn't know it
Coffee
was
time?
appropriate for me, bringing the jug over here. These new rules there, Teresa, do you know if it's okay if they show it up?
Go for it.
Oh, yeah, or not?
I hope so. I need like 5 patients.
Yeah, coffee break.
There's coffee.
You don't drink coffee?
Tea.
Tea.
Hey, how about that 19-year-old kid from
Live streams
Go
on
ahead.
the,
But
then we have a link to it on our website.
Is that his name? Yes.
Automatically.
He has his whole thing.
It's supposed to anyway,
He's
we'll
gotta be
find out.
good.
Oh, right, okay. So there has been a change.
Yeah, just yesterday. Yeah.
Do you anticipate any other changes or is this that?
No, but I didn't anticipate that.
Okay. Alrighty. That's, just 'cause it has to be reported at UDP next week. If there's any other changes, just let us know.
Now, let's see, do you guys have copies of the agenda?
Oh, I got more.
You do? I've got one for you. Have another one, that'd be great. Teresa's got it there.
Thank you.
We're still on intermission. We'll wait till our chair is back, I think.
So it's like the drive-in, so
Yeah.
it's refreshment
We
time.
need fancy hot dogs or something, right?
You just have salt popcorn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Back to business, Dave, you and also want to introduce yourselves, just,
Sure.
We know.
For the sake of the camera.
just for the, you know.
For the sake of the film.
Yeah.
Tell me, I would've gone powder or something first. Dave Turner, Oswego County Department of Community Development, Tourism and Planning. And Operations Oswego County Deputy Director, reporting here today.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. Okay, manufacturing startup facility. Okay,
Waiting for one or?
Oh, Len's not here? Oh, okay.
Sure. See how fast we go on these other ones.
I think we'll just wait, we'll wait for Len, or?
Just for another minute. and then we'll-
There he is.
Okay. So, back to the regular order of business, number 14, the manufacturing startup facility.
Okay,
Austin?
sure. So for those who don't know, this is the project that the IDA has planned for the former Nestle site. Just to give you guys, it's a 30,000 square foot manufacturing facility that is going to be split up for multiple tenants, and sort of not necessarily an incubator facility, but a facility to be bringing in some manufacturing companies, either ones that are startups or ones that are kind of in their early growths or in an expansion phase, and kind of get them in there and then grow them and then move them out in the community and keep bringing in new companies that way. So we've been working on this project for probably close to a year now. Just some updates on this. On December 17th of last year, the sale was approved of land from the city of Fulton to the IDA. That was approved and in place now. Also in December, it was announced that the project is going to receive $850,000 in consolidated funding application funding. We are still in the running for funding through the DRI as well. We won't know about that until later this year. It's a total project cost of around $4.3 million, and we're anticipating that if all of the grant funding that we've applied for comes through, that the project there will probably be a gap of around $300,000 to $350,000. So there's still some other grants that we're looking at, some possibly through rural business development, rural business enterprise grants. But like I said, the IDA has committed $2 million to the project. We're looking at another about $2 million in grant funding, and then we'll see what we do with the last $300,000. But like I said, we're looking for some other grants at this point for that. Also on this project, since it has gone and gotten approved by the city for the subdivision and the sale of the property, the current phase we're looking at is submitting a site plan review on February 10th to the Planning Commission. That's the City of Fulton Planning Commission. That's if all the paperwork is ready. We're just waiting for CNS at this point to kind of have that ready for both the environmental side and the site side. And so right now we're looking at timing wise, and this is really subject to everything kind of working the way it's supposed to work, is the permitting approval in March of this year, design and engineering being done in June of this year, construction, and like I said, this is if everything goes forward like the way we think, construction possibly starting in July of this year, and then completion in March 2021. But a lot of things could happen that could push that off. But we kind of, if it all goes through the way we think it will, that's what we're looking at right now. So trying to see if there's anything else. The city of Fulton is also putting in $250,000. This is money that they got through the Northern Border Regional Commission that's to be used on that Nestle site. That's specifically for infrastructure on the site, road creation and utilities and things like that. So we can't use it specifically within the construction of the project, but that's some stuff that we're looking at doing for the project anyway. It's road extension and utility extension. So, do you guys have any questions about the project currently where it is, or anything else that we're looking to do with that? Morris.
Yeah. Austin, that's gonna run, that road to run north and south through the property?
Sure.
They'll come out through they cross the little railroad tracks near the spring works?
Where we're looking to do, so the project is currently, it's gonna be facing South 7th Street, and it's gonna be kind of close to where the old cogen was, not quite on that site, but just a little bit north of where that old cogen was. But we're actually looking at putting in a road which would be specifically for truck traffic. It would be taking South 6th Street, which currently does not extend into the Nestle site, and creating a South 6th Street extension, which goes south
off of Faith Street into the Nestle site, which would actually help make that property more marketable for other businesses to come in, because right now it's just one big, there's nothing, there's a little 5th Street extension for all these, and then at 7th Street, there's nothing in between. So that road would be specifically for truck traffic for our project, as well as other projects that would be developed on that Nestle site. And employee parking and traffic would come off of South 7th Street.
So the development of that road would behoove the city of Fulton.
Correct.
As
That's
far
why
as
they're looking to
further
put their money into it as well, because it wouldn't just impact our project, it would impact the rest of the development of that site.
Well, that's what I was trying to figure out, where the trucks would come in and out.
Yep.
Because,
They come out.
as you know, there's a lot of homes in that area.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons to design it that way.
Yes,
right? Keep
correct.
The loading docks facing away from the homes, towards the
Definitely.
interior of the parking.
There's also been discussion about taking the 5th Street spur that's been developed there, and possibly taking that and looping it into this whole thing, but that's still up in the air in terms of where the rest of the funding would come for that project, because it's quite a bit more than just doing what we're talking about doing, which is extending a road down in about 400 feet, something like that, for them to have to take that and loop it all the way around. But it's a possibility.
So where the road's gonna be shut off in the inside? the project?
Part of our plan is, it would dead end at the end of where our site is, but they'd have the opportunity, this is the city of Fulton, to take that and extend it and create a loop.
Well, that's what I was concerned
Sure.
about,
Yeah.
because there's two
Yep.
little railroad tracks, you cross over and you come out by the spring works.
Right, yeah.
Which I think truck traffic would be better that way,
Mhm.
as not to agitate
Yeah.
landowners, homes and all that.
That's something that could happen, but it's outside the purview of our project to make that happen.
Yeah, the current site plan shows just a hammerhead at the end of what our proposed drive is for future development if it warrants it.
My question is this, the new mayor has asked if possibly she could come up and visit maybe a meeting of ours for a little bit, which I
More
think
than
would be
welcome
fine.
anytime.
No.
The public is welcome except for Chairman.
She's a woman, so what?
She's also been very supportive of this project.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yep.
So as envisioned today, Morris, the
You
truck
got a
traffic
question over
Yeah.
here?
coming on Faith Street.
Yeah, so a good portion of this is gonna be, the DRI
That's
money,
what I was concerned about.
and you just said that it may be a while before they announce the
Mhm.
final projects. And you're hoping for construction in
Correct.
this summer.
Mhm.
So are we anticipating a decision by then, or are you gonna continue to move forward?
Well, the way that we've worked on this project to date is we're looking to do the project. If we don't get that funding through the DRI, probably most likely what it would do is shrink the project size.
Gotcha.
So we're looking at 30,000. We may drop it to 25 or 20 if that funding doesn't come through. We're still committed to do the project, but it would obviously negatively impact what we could do if we didn't get that funding.
Understand.
So, and I believe that funding that we're looking for from the DRI is 750,000. So it's of a $4.3 million project. It's a decent chunk of it, but it's not something that's going to make or break it overall. It just would change the project scope.
Any other questions, anything for Austin? Dave?
So, point of information about the DRI money, if you're asking for 20% or less,
Mhm.
and your project is approved, you'll probably get what you're asking for. If your 750 is in excess of 20%, you probably won't. The process for that money to be approved and released probably you won't know until after July whether you're gonna be funded. But I can tell you for conversation within this room, cause it hasn't been publicly released
Hold
yet.
on, this is live streamed.
Okay,
Just want to make sure you know.
there's generally good public opinion about the project, I can say that comfortably, okay? They had a public meeting last week and people basically voted on projects. And this was one that received favorable responses.
Thanks, David.
We're still not sure. I mean, it could happen, it couldn't. I know there's a lot of competition. There's something like 30, almost 40 projects that are vying for money through the DRI. This one it's a strong project, to the best of our knowledge. But like I said, if for some reason, and that's why we're only doing this design work up through June, and then we're going to be kind of in a holding pattern a little bit. If it takes longer for us to find out if the DRI can get it or not, or pretty much the project's gonna be paused at that point until we find out if we do get it. And, because if we go too far with the project without knowing that, it could endanger us getting that funding, even if we were awarded or not. So we will have a certain point where we kind of have to pause the project and can't go any further until we know where that goes.
Any other questions for Austin? Austin, thank you very much for the update.
Thanks, Austin.
Appreciate it. Okay, number 15, the Economic Advancement Plan, the website portal. So how do we want to handle this? Austin, you want to start us off on that also?
I can do that, sure. So, one of the economic advancement plan initiatives is to develop a website, which is a collaborative effort of the different economic development organizations and partners within the county. And so one of the initiatives that we are looking to focus on this year is the development of a portal which would, we have our own website which focuses mostly on our initiatives, but it also, at the end of it, it sort of branches and sends people to other places if there's things like referrals to, say, Oswego County Workforce Development Board or SBDC or things like that. This is something that would be more encompassing of all of the partners at the start, and then sort of kind of be a, are you an existing business? And it would, you know, and very quickly get you to what would be important for you as an existing business, or are you someone, site selector, or someone looking for land in Oswego County that would get you directly to where you need to be very quickly. It's something to, and it would also allow us to track. So if somebody is coming to this portal and coming and looking for things for economic development, and they click and they go through to, say they go through the SBDC, we'd be able to find out, not necessarily exactly who they are, but we'd be able to get raw data of what is most important for somebody coming in, and then we can kind of use that information to better market and or maybe beef up other areas that we think should be more important, but people maybe aren't visiting as much. So it'll be an important tool for us, and it'll be a good way to collaborate with our other partners in economic development, both at the local level as well as regional level, and then, you know, everyone in between. So that's something that we redeveloped our own, the Operation Oswego County website a couple of years ago, and kind of had a process that we went through with that, and kind of learned some things and some do's and don'ts for doing something like this. So what we were looking to do is develop the portal in-house, because it's something we're going to have to administer anyway. However, we would be looking to bring in possibly some professional assistance for maybe some graphic design and some other things that would help to make it really pop, as well as maybe to assist on some things with some of the partner information. We're planning on going to the partners and getting the information from them directly and having them have some input in how this would, you know, what things would look like. But we think that we have the capacity and capability to do most of it in-house outside of some graphics.
I mean, I want to thank Evelyn Vody, who was doing our website cam in Austin. We had a couple meetings on this, and this is one of the action items from our Economic Advancement Initiative that we spent as resulting from the Coleman report. And this is something that is something that's needed by the county. It's something that's needed by our organization, and it can only benefit us. And I want to thank them for everything they've done, but one of the things we have to take into consideration is they have quite a workload, so it's not something they can develop in-house exclusively. So we talked to them, and we want to reach out to a third party to help them assist in setting it up with the graphics, content, and whatever. And, you know, according to what they would want to use, their specs, you know, they went through all this dot that, which is way over my head. And I told them at the end of the day, when this thing is done, just make it so I can go on there and navigate it. If they can do that, then I think we have a success. But it is going to cost some money to do this. And so what I was going to request from the board is just set up an account for developing this, and not to exceed maybe $20,000, and maybe it won't reach that point, but maybe it will. but, you know, with their time, with everything that's going on, you know, especially after all the work they did with Upstate Energy Jobs to get that going, I don't wanna put this burden on them exclusively. So, you know, we're hoping this can be done, what did you say, Austin, about 3 to 6 months if everything goes well?
From start.
So,
Is that assuming that the heavier portion of the lift would not be on OOC staff?
I mean, I'm thinking that's us getting all the partners together, starting to have meetings. I mean, a lot of this is a lot of it's going to be the actual building of it, but a lot of it's just going to be getting everybody in the room and deciding what should be on this. We're going to have to kind of build sort of a storyboard for it a little bit as well. We have looked at a lot of precedent. Evelyn's collected a lot of precedent looking at other areas. They do this sort of as like sort of a campaign, you know, and how you would build this. And so we have some good information on that. I would say probably once we have everybody in place, it'd be probably closer to 3 to 4 months. But you know, if we have some things that we run into or takes a while to get partners together, probably closer to 6 months or a little longer.
and this, excuse me, Tom, one of the things that this does, and it not only does, this hits 2 or 3 of our action plans. Number one, it's a business-friendly website for retaining and attracting new business. It also can be used for marketing, and it also is another aspect of collaboration between county agencies, economic development county agencies, so we can come together and work for the betterment of economic development of Oswego County. So I think it hits 2 or 3 different action items, and I think this will really work out well.
Well, I don't know that we need to set any additional monies aside. We've already earmarked $400,000 for economic advancement plan initiatives, financing initiatives. This line right with that, I assume we can just pay it down right from that fund. The other piece I wanted to mention was that was one that we haven't got to the Center State CEO proposal, but if we're looking to not put the burden on OOC staff, we've already got a vehicle set up where we have people who can hold all those meetings, who can set up all that, who can do that infrastructure work, and they've already offered us a contract to do that kind of a thing. So,
Yeah, but the whole thing about this is we want the linesman share of it to be done in-house as far as working to get this thing set up so it's easy, you know, it works better for them.
well, I understand that, but I guess
And you know, we talked about this between the county, us, and everybody. And there's a couple initiatives that we're looking to work on, but this one, we talking to Evelyn and Austin and a few others. We feel like this one with a third party coming in, that money would be well spent to do it in-house instead of paying another agency to help coordinate what we need to do.
well,
You know.
and I wasn't part of any discussion between you and the county, so I apologize for not being
No,
aware
that's-
of that.
that's okay.
But I guess my point would be, we just heard this is gonna be a 4 to 6 month process because of the inability for the staff to handle it in addition to all the other stuff you're talking about. We've got funding set aside, we've got a contract with folks who are already well understanding of. In fact, that was one of the main recommendations that came out of last year's Center State CEO project. So,
They don't move that fast, though.
They wouldn't move any faster, I
They'd be
don't think.
slower.
But
Maybe provide
My-
a deliverable for last year.
We haven't even had deliverables from, that's gonna be an interesting discussion.
my take on this particular part of the project is, the way I see it happening is the OOC staff coordinating with the people that they work with every day on all these projects that come through here, and getting together with the people that are their colleagues in our county and deciding what we need in our county for the website. Drive it from that angle, and then take the burden off of you guys from actually typing in the computer or any HTML code or anything like that. You can direct what you want and have it done the way you want it, but take the time of having to do that and put it all together and put the picture here and put the line here, give that to somebody else that's a techie company to actually do the grunt work of building the site.
and maybe we should discuss the Center State thing first, because my understanding is there is a steering committee made up of the types of folks that they're gonna be interacting with, who are going to be continuing to meet. There's already the infrastructure, there's already the folks who are gonna reach out to, whether it be the cities, whether it be the college, whether it be any other organizations, they're already on that. So I don't know that putting together another meeting group would make more sense.
Well, this is just for a specific task. I mean, if you're gonna go to a meeting to meet with a steering group, you're gonna be talking about the overarching issues of whatever else we're discussing throughout the entire county. This would be a working group, it wouldn't necessarily be Pam Caracoli from the college, it would be someone who would be the person that these guys interact with on a daily basis for the purposes of directing businesses around. So it might be the same organization, but it'd be a different person, from my perspective, it might be coming from that organization. Can you guys address that part of
Well,
it?
that was part of it, and you totally touched on the thing that I wanted to comment on. Going forward with this advancement plan, these are the people that we're gonna be partnering with. I understand that Center State CEO has, gone out to a lot of these partners. I mean, Camoin did that before them and met with all these different people and got input. But the thing is, moving forward, we've got to establish that kind of rapport with these partners. Because we're trying to put this all together. It's our advancement plan. It's Oswego County's advancement plan. And we need to be having that functional day-to-day relationship with all these partners. Why not start with one of these projects and do exactly that?
I agree, I think it should be in-house. I mean, I think that the responsibility should be in-house with hiring third party to do the software development. And then you guys have the control of it, and as opposed to having someone else have the control of it.
And as Gary said, you set it up, you direct how this third party is gonna operate so that it's set up so that you can operate it after the fact. After
Right,
it's,
because we'll be
after it's set up, you can
maintaining
maintain it.
Yes.
But take the setup time and effort that goes into that and subcontract it out.
I just would like the last 2 days I've been in Syracuse for meetings from the airport, Hancock Airport, to the on-center with vegetable growers all over the state and so on and so forth. If we contain control, believe me, I think these kind of projects here, it's very important.
And to back up a little bit, when I first sat down with Austin and Evelyn, this is something they've been looking to do for a year or so. But with everything going on, it's been tough for them to focus on it. So it's something of
Well, we've also waited because of the advancement plan, because
So-
it became an item on the advancement plan. We've also waited, it's with the intention, but now we're gonna roll it into this.
So I think they have a good grasp on what needs to be done with third-party assistance for setup and graphics or whatever else needs to be there. And they're gonna be maintaining it, so it has to be done for them to have control over it, so.
So you want a motion then I'll make a motion to not to exceed 20 grand for development of a website portal.
Second.
Motion is second.
Is that in addition to the 400 we've already earmarked, or would that be?
The
Is that
400
gonna be
we've
general
earmarked
funds or?
was for specific projects.
Right, this is a specific project that was outlined
Well, I don't
within,
see why we couldn't allocate it out of that money.
that's what I'm wondering.
I don't think,
Kevin?
I had different ideas in mind for
EDF,
projects.
that would be out of that project, how would that would be?
I think, I believe that was marked from the EDF funds.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah, so, yeah, I mean,
It might be just something the board consider because whether that was intended for external projects development versus an internal sort of project, if you follow me. This is sort of
My mindset on that $400,000 was to assist in developing a larger scale projects that would come out of this, like what we might be discussing coming down the road here on the next bullet point. But I think $20,000, I don't think.
Well, no, the other reason I asked is because that fund is not able to cover the cost of internal staffing. And so the question was, if we're going to.
Well, I think
this.
I think what we're looking at allocating the money for is not to cover our internal staff, it's to cover the cost of hiring a third-party developer to do the work of designing the site, hosting the site, and all those kinds of things. So that $20,000 would not be paid to Operations Oswego County, it would be paid to whoever this developer is.
Right.
And that would be, we wanna put the cap on
So
the bill.
the current staff have enough availability in their current daily time to be able to handle this project.
We're not looking at paying for overtime or anything like that, we're looking at paying for.
And they said, we talked to them and that was one of my requirements, I don't want them putting more hours in a day because there's only a certain number of hours and they're working very hard at what they do. So that's why a third party I think is important, to work with them to do, the heavy lifting.
But the staff has the time to hold the meetings, to be that structure, to get all the groups together.
Defer to Austin on that.
Yep.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
yeah, as long as we're not the one who's also having to put in all the code and all the other stuff on that. I mean, holding 4 or 5 meetings or something like that or more, that's not too bad.
But they would be doing it under your direction and setting it up according to what you guys would wanna use.
So the money you're looking to use for this would be purely for paying the web designer, the graphics designer, other outside folks that
Yes.
the current staffing would be able to handle.
Hosting, whatever other ancillary bills on it. Videos. Yeah, we're gonna do video testimonials and stuff like that.
So I have a motion and a second?
Yeah.
All those in favor?
I just don't understand what we're voting on, I'm sorry, what are we doing here?
Voting on authorizing $20,000 to hire
But
people that.
my point is, we've already authorized up to 400 to do it, do we need a separate resolution to
Well, I just wanna,
sub-allocate?
I wanna
think we
control costs.
Okay.
So
Identify
we've got
costs
to
for
identify
setting
the
up
No, I'm
number.
saying, this
Okay.
is, here's project number 1, let's do this.
So you're giving, us the authority to spend up to $20,000
On
of the
this.
400,000 that was previously allocated, is that?
Well, I would really like to discuss, I'm gonna abstain from this vote until we've discussed the Center State CEO contract, because again, I think that should have probably came first. This is a project outlined in their contract proposal, and so without having discussed that, I don't feel confident authorizing someone else to spend money.
Okay.
That's fine.
We can have the vote anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so any more discussion? We have a motion and a second, correct?
Yep.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And
Abstain.
and one abstention. Okay. Okay, Center State CEO consulting agreement. Do you have that? Right here in,
Yeah, should be a number 16 in your
Number
packet, a
16.
copy of it. Yeah. You've seen it before.
Mhm.
Put it out again.
Nick, do you wanna start this?
Sure.
No?
This is the proposal that Andrew made to us, our last meeting, in December. I've discussed this with Gary and we've put some thought into it, and here's my take on the situation. They proposed to us and that they go forward and develop the convening authority and whatnot as the core of what they're gonna do for the next year as far as advancing this plan forward. And then offered up the opportunity to spend $10,000 per project on a couple of different thoughts and ideas for different specific projects moving forward. So, topic A, the 2019 contract that we had with Center State CEO was joint with Oswego County. To this date, I haven't seen any deliverables, final deliverable, as far as that contract is concerned.
They've not been received.
I can, has the county received anything?
They have not been received, yeah.
Okay.
I have not seen anything.
Yeah. Based on our conversation at the last meeting, I thought Andrew was gonna be here today to be able to discuss that with us. His point to us at our previous meeting was he was waiting to the end of the calendar year, and then the calendar year's over, then he's gonna make a presentation to us summarizing what they've accomplished for us in the previous year. So before we move forward with anything for 2020, I think we need to see that deliverable and decide for ourselves how well we've done with that relationship for 2019. Point B, in 2019, this was a joint project with the county and the IDA funding the project. Going forward in 2020, having had discussions with Chairman Weatherup and with Gary, it's not gonna happen unless this is funded by the IDA, okay? So if we wanna move forward with this project and continue to work with Center State in driving keeping the economic advancement plan from ending up on the shelf and contracting with them to help us and maintain this and keep it a living document and working forward, it's gonna need to be funded by the IDA. Personally, I think it makes sense for the IDA to be the driving force behind keeping this from being a dust gatherer. And if we choose to contract with Center State CEO to help us do that, then that's our prerogative. And if we don't have the bandwidth and the time with our contracted staff to do all these things and conduct all these meetings and everything else, for us to contract with someone to maintain those and keep that moving, I think makes sense, okay? The question is, what are we getting for our money? And we haven't seen what we got for our money from last year yet, so we need to see that before we move forward. And we need to have a clear deliverable going forward for what we're gonna expect from them from 2020. So that's where we're at that point.
So we're not voting on this today?
Well, we could, I don't see, I mean, we could vote on it contingent on our, I don't think it makes any sense to vote on it right now.
I mean, that's where we see the deliverable.
What do you say, Dave?
Well, I'm just thinking based on what you were just talking about, now, so here we are mid-January, and you're waiting on a deliverable from last year, and not executing an agreement with these guys until perhaps your meeting in February. It'd be interesting to know in more detail, because of the proposal, when I read it, seemed kind of vague in a lot of places. So, is the dollar amount that they gave you based on an anticipated number of hours per month over the year? Is it based on certain accomplishments over the course of the year? If it's based on, like, let's call it billable hours,
we don't start till March.
You're not starting till March, then perhaps that number needs to be considered before you actually adopt it. Just looking at it from the outside.
It's worth consideration. So there's a couple different things we need to look at within the proposal too, just for our own sake. Before so we can have the discussion today so that we're all on the same page, all right? What Gary and I had talked about was if we get a good deliverable from 2019 and we get a clear plan from them for what we're gonna get for the $20,000 for 2020, we enter into the agreement for the convening authority and keep them involved. And basically the way I see it is the $20,000 is the retainer to keep them in the game for 2020, okay? And that gets them involved, and then if we wanna do any specific project with them, they're basically put a price tag on it of $10,000 a project, okay? And the two project areas that we thought would be focused on were infrastructure and agribusiness park, okay? And so the agribusiness ties into the project that we've been working on with the expansion of the industrial park in Phoenix. And the infrastructure ties into the whole discussion of expanding wastewater treatment, roads, things like that throughout the county that need to happen in order to develop additional business. And that's what we thought would be priorities, and we've discussed that idea with Chairman Weatherup, and he, generally speaking, I think would be in agreement that those are things that would make sense.
But the county's not gonna participate this time.
County's not gonna participate financially in it, all right? But the county's gonna have
We're gonna
eyes
work
all
with the
over
county on this.
all right, so, what it does, one aspect of what it does is it takes us paying for it, takes it away from being a joint county and IDA project, but it puts the IDA front and center as far as delivering on the projects, delivering on moving this project forward, moving this advancement plan forward. And makes us the lead on it and puts Center State CEO as our contractor helping us achieve those goals. And so that's, I think.
Can we put our finger on anything positive they've done this year as far as the deliverable?
Well, I wasn't at the meeting in November where they had kind of a wrap up meeting.
I wasn't either.
But Austin, you were there, Dave, you were there, and Gary was there. I think Tim was there. I don't know if you made it, Morris, to that meeting over at Steamers in November, but from people that I've talked to that have been there, I've heard differing views on how well they presented the case, but I think there's been progress made, and there's been ideas that have been put forward that make sense, that help us go in a direction. And Gary, maybe you can talk more on that part of it.
Again, we're waiting for the deliverables, but in my opinion, the deliverable was we put these committees together. We had the five, we narrowed down the report to 5 action items, because we couldn't act on all of them. And the 5 action items are listed in your report right here. And these are the ones that everybody deemed the ones that we needed to work on immediately. And we put some committees together through the steering committee and under Center State, with them being, kind of mentoring us, and put the committees together. The committees met, our committee met like 4 or 5 times, and we funneled everything into a report, the cooperation committee, which resulted in the portals and stuff. So
And they were at these, they were facilitating these meetings?
they were there. We did
Not
a lot.
individual committee meetings.
Yeah.
No, they were not. Okay.
Unless they were at yours, they
They
never
were
were
ours.
at mine.
Andrew was on our committee.
Oh, well, there
And
you
he
go.
sat basically silent, listening, and then we would, Pam Caracoli did a tremendous job. And we had a good makeup of economic leaders throughout the county, and some town superintendents that we included to get a rural makeup on our committee. What Center State, in my opinion, did was kind of push us for reports, updates, progress. And so it was kind of like a homework assignment. You were under the gun. By this meeting, you'd be this, deliverable. And then another stage, which at the end of the year, we did the report down to steamers. I thought it was very beneficial because they didn't tell us what to do. Well, basically, we narrowed it down. We set the committees up. They didn't tell us how to do it or what to do. We did it on our own.
But the other committees ran autonomously?
Well,
Clearly?
I can only speak for the infrastructure committee. We didn't have anyone from Center State attend our meetings.
Well, but they still sent you notices
We still
and
got the
timelines and
homework assignments.
Homework
that
assignments,
everybody
yeah.
else got, yep.
So I think they served a purpose in just pushing this forward, because, if we put our own committees together, we might not have been under the gun to get these reports ready and everything.
Somebody's got to hold the candle out there.
Yeah, somebody's got to be the coach, and we did the heavy lifting. So I think there is some benefit to it. Going back what Nick said, we had a steering committee. The steering committee, now they're looking at a convening force for these 5 action items. Now, we've already taken, one of the action items right off the table. So if they're looking at $10,000 per action item, we had to decide which ones Center State could play a role in and benefit us, and which ones that we can do. And that goes to your question, Tim. We felt that the portal and stuff, we already had somewhat of a grasp on, and we can take that $10,000 that we might have spent for Center State to kind of move us along and put it towards something that would
Well,
be
sure, but we just
immediate.
authorized $20,000 to do it.
Well,
It's up to $20,000.
the $10,000 would have gone if we had. One other point. When Andrew was here and talking to us in December, he mentioned that we'll do the core $20,000 for the convening force, and then we'll do a couple extra projects. His sweet spot was 1, 2, or maybe 3 projects.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't want to get too far out into that.
Right.
And
they're not actually doing anything, they're facilitating.
they're facilitating. They're
This is
not
to
typing
get
in any
This
code.
is to get stuff
This
done.
money's actually going towards a developer, not towards Center State.
Right, we probably
Coordinate.
still would have spent 20 plus the
Oh,
10.
yeah,
Exactly.
more.
Right,
I
so
struggle
I'm
to
just
find
saying.
any value with these.
Austin's got a comment.
I was just, actually, you just kind of made the point. I was gonna say I saw the report that Center State gave, not the deliverable, but for the proposal for next year, and it seemed pretty vague in terms of what was actually going to be delivered in terms of each of these projects. They kind of give an average of $10,000, but we don't know if a project's 5,000 or 50,000 really. I mean, it's really on a case by case basis depending on what the scope of the project is and what it is. I mean, I think they're just giving you some ballpark numbers I don't know if you could really take that and take it to the bank in terms of that's what it's gonna cost per project.
Good point.
Morris?
I've been drifting around, as I just said. I think primarily to put us in a position to deal with people and adjust into the county on a dog and our partners all around us. It's a good point to maybe partake a little bit with this organization and get, because they're out there all over the place with the business community and industrial community. And I'll give you a perfect example. In Fulton, the Bird's Eye Project, so to speak. We have iFreeze there. They're trying to get a railroad developed to bring in product to that site. It's abandoned. It hasn't been used for years. And they're having problems. Somehow or another, we have to get our message out to these kind of people, like Conrail. You're stopping product. You're stopping projects. And it's not just that project. Water systems going under their tracks. They won't allow a municipality to drill underneath the tracks, and they're not running it. I mean, there's things like this we have to. I see it and hear it, and it aggravates me because here's a brand new operation bringing in rail, which they could use business, in my opinion. It's stymied. Even putting water under their tracks, which was drilled in the construction business, which you people understand better than myself, was that water line to feed 50 homes on the other side. Stopped. So I mean, I think we need to put ourselves out there.
Isn't Center State a regional?
Yeah.
So whether we have this or not,
Well,
that should come with the deal.
Yeah, so, and David sat in our meetings too, and David brought a great perspective on everything. So Dave, do you wanna add to what we were discussing?
Well, let me say I'm kind of ambivalent about whether or not they function as a consulting agency to keep conversations going. If they do, I think they could give you a better description of what they're actually gonna do and what you're gonna get. But with regard to the specific projects, the two that you've selected, I think are two that we're likely to include in a URI ask, which should be being developed as we speak. I mean, I think we're behind the curve on that. But I think before you agree to a contractual price for their assistance, they should be able to identify what specifically are you gonna do for us that's different than what you would do for any other member agency who you're supposed to be servicing. So we pay money to belong to the organization. There's some expectation that for that fee, there's some kind of service. So if you're gonna pay another 10,000 or 50,000, whatever it is, what specifically is beyond your normal scope that you're charging us this money for? And I think you need to get more into the weeds before you start talking about allocating money for certain things, and those projects should be like set aside at least until you know more information. But I think you picked two good ones.
So if the point was that again, which is why I wish we had done this one first. If the point was we have higher priorities that we want them to help us with, then that makes a lot of sense. If the web portal is the third priority and they can only handle two, well then absolutely we should do it in-house. I think that just makes sense. So thank you for that information. That's good.
The point that's getting missed here is we allocated money to do something. These guys, we'd allocate money to them for them to hire somebody else that we pay to do something.
Well, and that's a fair point, but I think that you were not, unfortunately, in any of those almost monthly meetings with high level local folks all having discussions. Then there were subcommittee meetings that all met, and then there was an excellent, I thought, meeting where they went through and they unrolled everything that they had done for months.
The meeting notices were only like a week or so in advance, and I was going for every single one.
So I mean, there was. You're right. We have not received a final report, and I would hope to receive it, especially after our last meeting. But I think there was quite a bit that was given. I can tell you without a doubt that we would not be where we are right now on this plan if not for them. It's just not even a discussion. I mean, there were so many hours of time. But here's the most important piece: is there was a lot of hours of time donated. The whole group and every single group. I mean, outside of the Center State staff, were folks who were there giving their time. I don't even know that all those donated time hours are coming back. I mean, I love the idea of a structure to help us put this back together again, but assuming that all that time is still going to be available, I don't know. I don't know if Center State has reached out to those folks who made up that core steering committee.
Not yet, this depends on this for the convening group.
Sure.
You know, it'd be another, step. I guess to cut to the chase, I talked to Nick about it, and like I said, Dave and, Chairman Weatherup and I discussed it, and, we do want the deliverables set up for what we did last year. We want, as Dave correctly implied, we want a more specific description of what's to be expected, and stuff. And, and again, this is just a recommendation. I mean, we could act on it today, we don't. We looked at the $20,000 for the convening force for putting this thing together, like Nick says, a retainer, but focusing on agribusiness and focusing on infrastructure, because those were the two, other than website portal, those were the two main things, and we've discussed those things for a long time, you know, infrastructure and agribusiness. So if we did it, the impact to the IDA would be around $40,000.
Do we have specifics? I mean, if we were gonna send out like an RFP or something like that, we would be, you know, specifying exactly what we intended to see and what we were asking to have done.
I think that's a good point, and part of our discussion the other day was for this convening force, say we hire them for the convening force and moving forward. If we're gonna hire them for these other two projects, that doesn't, and based on what we talked about with Andrew last month, those don't have to start right away. We can add things on as we go. And my sense was that we need to get our own house in order as far as what we want from them, and not ask them to tell us what they're gonna give us, but tell them what we want before we get a proposal exactly, and then they can give us a price for agribusiness park. This is what the IDA and the County of Oswego expect from this. How much would it cost for you to help us get to that point? If we expect you to do the request for the CFP or what, not an RFP, but the
URI
funding,
CFA application, whatever, a consolidated funding thing. If we expect them to get to the grant writing part of it, what's that gonna cost? If we expect them to build everything together, you know, what do we want them to do? And let's get our own house in order and say, hey, we want you to do this. This is what we wanna have somebody do. Can you do it for us, and how much would it cost? And so we need to get our ducks in a row as far as those two projects are concerned first. But my thought is, based on what you said about the meeting in November and what the progress we have made, I think we need to keep the ball rolling. So my sense is, I would vote in favor of putting the $20,000 on the table and keeping the ball rolling and with the convening force. But hold their feet to the fire a little bit beforehand and say, hey, give us the deliverable from last year first, and let's see what you've got, and then tell us exactly what we're gonna get for this $20,000. And then we say, all right, we want this. How much would this cost for this proposal, and how much would this cost for this proposal? Does that make sense?
it makes sense. You know, I think it's two ways. So what can you deliver? What can you give us? But we also have to have our expectations too.
Right.
You know, I think it's a two-way thing.
How do those expectations come to be
developed?
though? Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's.
I think we need to get together with a subcommittee from here and a subcommittee from the county, and develop what we want, what we expect from an agribusiness proposal. I think that we should pull some people off of the agribusiness subcommittee that was out there last year, and that included.
Yeah, you can spend a day, have a meeting for a day and go around and, you know, I've done things like that at Nagamawk. I mean, we have paper all over the walls with thoughts and things, and then we put everything together, and that's what we
And I
want.
think that committee has already done a lot of that work, all right? So we sit down with that committee first, with someone representing the IDA and someone representing the county, and say, hey, where have you been through the last 12 months? You've gone through this process. What do you see our next steps being? All right, then let's all put our heads together and say, all right, this is where we want to go, because we've gone down the road of getting this project to a certain point already, based on land acquisition and things like that. So, you know, there's things already in the works, but let's.
How about if we?
Well, I was gonna say, if I could, to Barry's point, and I completely agree with him. I feel uncomfortable authorizing any additional contract without deliverables being provided, especially ones that we are expected and we're led to believe would be here. So I completely agree with that. Do we need to move this now? I mean, the money's already
No, no.
earmarked in
No.
our accounts, so same thing as with our website one, the money's there.
The suggestion I was gonna make is, at least we have an idea of what we could be spending, okay? Get a hold of Andrew Fish, or whoever, we'll sit down and talk with him and explain to him exactly what this discussion was all about. Get the deliverables, talk about the convening course, how it's gonna be set up, how it's gonna be done, what what do we expect out of that? And then also talk to him about these two, and if everybody agrees that, David, please chime in. We think agribusiness and infrastructure are two action items, if they could possibly help us on, make sure that they come with a game plan on that, and then invite Andrew to the next meeting with specifics and everything, and we can take action then. He told me it was time sensitive because they have a lot of other things going on, but it's not like it's gotta be done yesterday.
How many of you get through the website, their schedule of events that they're attending or doing?
No, I don't, I've never seen them.
Emails, sure.
Yeah, I do.
I don't.
No, I've never
I
looked.
have no idea, because did they have meetings up in the on-center and things going on?
Oh, I get those.
Projects and stuff.
I get those, because I'm a member of
But
the
I'm just-
Chamber of Commerce.
I'm looking at them as a sort of a lobbying firm in our area to help us get projects like I just told you, the abandoned railroad, we need some pressure put on some of these people.
But I don't think that has anything to do with what we're
Right,
talking about
that
here.
they're supposed to be doing
That's-
for us anyway.
yeah.
My thing is, private sector would have blown this away compared to what I've seen from these guys for 30 grand. My personal opinion. Why are we spending with one of our political partners 30 grand when we could hire a gun to get this done? That's my perspective on what I'm seeing here. And that's the way
Well,
it is.
we hired a private firm to develop our economic advancement plan, and that was kind of met with mixed,
Understood.
And so, we've got this train basically rolling down the tracks, and I think if we, allow them to, if we enter into an agreement to say, no, this is what we want, this is where we expect to be, get specifics on it,
And not
then,
pay them if they don't make it.
well, that's,
Right, just like you would, I mean, this is a contract hire.
So are you
Hire someone
saying,
to paint your house, and they don't pay you don't pay them.
are you saying you want to authorize the 20, or you wanna
That's
hold
right.
it off until next month?
Yeah.
But you're gonna talk to them and tell them, yes, but we need to be more
This is-
specific.
This is what we discussed, and this is what we're looking for, but
Okay.
we need this, and this, and this before we approach.
So you wanna table this?
Yeah, but I just wanted to just make sure that.
I think we
we're on
needed
the
to
same
have
page.
this discussion internally, and I think it's almost better that Andrew wasn't here.
Right.
And to have he
Yeah.
can watch it on TV if he wants to, but this is a discussion that needed to be had.
But then, hopefully he'll have everything set, well, hopefully, he better have everything set up for our next meeting. And then I'm gonna invite him to our next meeting to go over it, and David, if you can attend, that would be awesome to have you here, because, you bring a great perspective to all the economic development plans that we've done, and you've been involved in them.
Are you going to try then to convene those couple of groups, and get some specifics, to give Andrew? You think, or?
I think it makes sense. I don't know, Gary, if you don't,
The convening for.
not the convening
group-
for it.
No, I mean, no, the groups you were talking about.
The infrastructure committee
So
and
that
the agribusiness.
Infrastructure, yeah, so that you come out of with some specific
David, you were on
deliverables.
infrastructure, right? So that's an easy one right there. David's sitting right there, and he probably has an idea of what
Would be
expectations
deliverables,
are.
some things that we would want.
And I can definitely, work with, Nancy Weber, or whoever was on the,
I mean, it would be
Shane
nice.
Broadwell was on that committee, and he's got a lot of ideas that came out of it. and
Those
he's
are
pretty
the-
fired up about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's.
He indicated he wanted to be part of it going forward as well.
So,
Tim Hardy also.
so,
Tim Hardy, I think, would be one you'd wanna talk to.
But I think it would make sense to reach out to Andrew and make sure that, he's essentially writing a contract that he's gonna have the convening force be available. Has he reached out to them? Does he know they're still interested? I would assume they would, but who knows?
I don't
So-
think he has, us not getting into the agreement yet.
Okay.
This is infrastructure I'm talking about. it's all over the place. And we have restrictions on ourselves. We have empty plants sitting here. They're sitting here because not cooperating by some
That's why we need to
agencies.
do that, you're right.
They're not cooperating.
That makes sense.
So is that okay with the board to do that, to obviously talk to the two committees that were agribusiness and infrastructure, have them detail what they expect in the next year, talk to Andrew Fish or Ben about the deliverables from the years past, and make sure that they understand what we expect and what they can do for the following year, and then we'll decide on entering into an agreement with them. Kevin? Yeah.
If I could, just, and it's really more a reiteration of David's point, but on the proposal from Center State, it references the timeline. It says this work is expected to last the entirety of 2020 and will start on the first of the year. So if we're into next year, or next month, that's, 11 months, so now it's not 20,000, it's it 18,000? And those are the issues and things that you'd really wanna clarify and manage your
Timetable
money.
starts the date we enter the agreement.
Or push the timetable
push
to next February
Right.
or something.
I mean, I think one of the things I see is that they didn't give us the 2019 deliverables, so, I mean, I think that would change this discussion a little bit if we had those.
Contractually, were there 2019 deliverables? I mean, I know you
There was some
mentioned it, but
specific
that's what I
metrics
was, I
and
don't
things that
remember
they
what
were
was in them.
supposed to give
That's
us.
what I was wondering.
Not only
they
that,
haven't produced
but
yet.
Andrew did, sitting right there
Yes.
and committed to doing that.
Yep, I agree.
Well, it's right here in the minutes.
But I more meant because, we did have a contract 2018 and 2019, and if those
That was
numbers,
paid.
and we, I was gonna say we paid it, if we
Significant.
paid it, then that's a fair question.
That was more money. So,
Dave, you have any more input as far as the county's perspective on this?
Well, I think that you've got a couple other agenda items here that are gonna impact this discussion as well as you go forward, so some of that's depending on the outcome of those agenda items.
Okay. All right, so is everybody comfortable with
Yes.
what we discussed? Okay,
Very
and
good.
I'm gonna let
I
Andrew
gotta
the next
cut out.
meeting.
Good to see you.
thanks for coming.
Take care, Bob. Thank you.
I mean, we'll still vote our conscience on what we see,
Yeah.
but at least we'll have the information.
Okay. All right, very good. We don't have to take any action on that.
No.
Just good discussion. Very good discussion. Okay, 17, sewer authority.
I think that is generally in my house to discuss. I have started gathering information with respect to formation of a potential countywide sewer authority. I don't have a deliverable for you today to have a real intelligent discussion on it.
Deliverables again.
But what I'd like to do is similar to what Kevin did in terms of presentation on some of the other projects. Have kind of a spreadsheet with a bit of a rough roadmap on how this is to be created. It is it's a process that requires special legislation, state legislation, creation of a either a countywide authority or partnering with an established authority, and those are kind of the two paths that we can consider, and there's going to have to be an analysis on whether one is going to be more of a cost benefit to the community than the other, and then what we're looking to accomplish and how it can all be put together. But
So you're not really enough yet to.
I don't have something that we can have a real intelligent discussion today about, but those are the.
It's on the radar.
Is this, this, to me, it's like a chicken or egg thing. Do we go forward to spend the money and work on putting together a sewer authority without dealing with the towns and municipalities to see where they stand as far as doing it? And, if we have meetings with them and most of them are in favor of doing it, then by all means, we move forward. And the other question is, instead of just sewer, maybe water too, could be included in, instead of being specific to sewer.
Right.
Just
You do have, just a word of caution on the water. You've got the, Onondaga County Water Authority that supplies water to, I don't know what the percentage is of our municipalities, but a large percent in Oswego County already. So there's a concern with,
Cause we're dealing with Colossus and Parrish and Palermo right now through the Mexico, water districts.
Right.
Because Palermo is hurting the school, you know, isn't getting the water it needs. Colossus is looking for it, and Parrish is developing their zone, and they've talked to Mexico, whether they're gonna do their own wells or not, I'm not sure. But it might not be a whole wide county, but it might be an authority that covers, you know,
Can
whatever.
I ask this question? To start with, can we get a picture of what it looks like today?
What exists?
What exists today?
Sure.
And
I have that.
what authority is servicing what municipality and on what road even, to that point of, you know, what's coming out of the city of Oswego, what's coming out of the city of Fulton, what's coming out of
And what
Aqua,
metro,
what
what they take care of, yeah.
There could be a difference too. I mean, Aqua right now, they're just a water supplier. They don't build any of the, I don't believe they build any of the infrastructure that the sewer districts have. They just, wanna buy water from Aqua, you can buy water from Aqua and they'll give you a price. So,
You have to build to their specs.
right. But in Oswego County Water Authority could be different in terms of they could actually own the infrastructure and things like that, whereas Onondaga County, they own up to a certain point and then you're responsible for the rest. So I mean, it could be a different it could be a similar model to what you're talking about with the sewer authority. But I guess then the question would be, do you do everything in terms of supply the water and distribute it, or do you buy water from Aqua and then distribute it through your network?
Dave, you said you had a comment on what they can do.
So yes, I can get you maps of what's out there now. Maybe not everything that Aqua has, because they're not as easy to get the information from. We were searching for some things earlier this year, and we had to go through the FOIL process and everything. Not real cooperative, but we have the sewer districts pretty well mapped, to the extent that the towns and villages have shared that with us. Have most of the water mapped as well. I think there's some benefit in considering like a more comprehensive local development authority that could include water, sewer, broadband, and other things that the authority felt were important to give yourself the ability to do those things if you decide to. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to, but legally structure it so you can, if it makes sense. With respect to the towns and villages and their interest, I attended a shared services meeting not long ago, and I was there to make a specific presentation about something else, but as I listened to the conversations between the supervisors and the mayors, I kept hearing concerns about water and sewer, and you know, we have to do this and then we have to do that, and everybody seemed like while they wanted to do these things, they were big problems for them. I mean, these are not easy projects for little communities. So I threw it out. I said, let's throw something against the wall. Crazy idea. What would you think if there was an entity in Oswego County that took care of all these infrastructure needs, and you didn't have to deal with it anymore? And there's a lot of head shaking going on.
Up and down, I hope.
So yeah, all very positive, you know. There was the only negatives were like the Northeast, where it's very rural. People thought that they would be charged for services that they didn't receive, and so once we explained that, you know, if you're not getting service, you're not paying into this fund, this organization of development. So I think that in general, you'd find, at least from the elected officials, that there's some interest in really talking about this more. The key would be not to fail to sell it properly like we did with the water project 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was just a marketing failure.
Yeah.
30 years ago. So I think it's worth spending this time to explore what we need to do to go down that road if we wanted to.
So I think the deliverable we're asking for is a map of what's there, and as far as sewer and water at this point, all right? And who controls it and what that situation is, and a possible roadmap for what would need to happen in order to form an authority, all right? Does that make sense, Kevin?
Yep.
and part of that was through that, the study the CNS did. They talked about sewers, capacities and things like that, and, I thought that was very informative when we talked about running it from, Volney down to Phoenix. They included a lot of, all the septic, municipalities that had septic, like Mexico Parish and everything, and what their capacities were, so.
So we have a bit of that in the economic development plan that Camoin did, there's a bit of that inventory in there.
Mhm.
Where's the plants, what's their capacity and all those things, but, I think, just to make one more point on being comprehensive, there's a lot of money that's gonna become available pretty soon for broadband and cell service. And we don't wanna exclude ourselves from being able to access that if we wanna do that, if, in the absence of somebody else doing it for us.
Can we get a picture of where we stand as far as that's concerned then, Dave, or how do we go about that? I just thought that would be a harder ask.
Austin probably has some of that, mapped, but it's, what they have is gonna be more relevant to areas likely to be developed as opposed to the general county and the rural areas.
Isn't there some kind of proposal that the county's working on for developing some type of fiber optics throughout the county, that people could tap into or something along those lines, like a loop?
Yeah, we own, half of a 60-mile loop, and, we have the ability to use that for certain, other purposes if we were to decide to. For example, there's counties in Florida that now are in the internet business because no one else was doing it. The other half of that loop is owned by a company out of Syracuse, and they, in Onondaga County, have done a lot of that independently. They're looking to do some more of that in Oswego County, but while the hard wire is, the backbone, so to speak, more and more, I think what you're gonna see, cost-effective delivery will be through, newer high-speed wireless connections. And the legislature actually has been talking, recently with, this company about bringing some of that capacity into Oswego County, locating on some towers we have, putting in some data centers. So some of that is coming. How far we can make that grow through third-party private folks, I think is dependent on how many customers that they can bring in, so.
Austin, you had something you would say?
Just to say something on the wireless and the broadband side, I think as technology improves and 5G technology, which is just getting rolled out in large cities right now, as that sort of proliferates, it's going to reduce the need for wired connections a lot. I mean, you'll have issues with privacy and some other things that'll come up with that, but with 5G, that's gonna. And right now, I mean, a lot of the county has 4G mostly along your I-81 and 81 backbones, but when you get several miles off that, I mean, you don't have a lot of service. So I mean, that's a challenge right there that needs to be addressed. But I think that you're right, the wireless, I mean, broadband's gonna be important as well, but I think that as we go, I mean, 20, 30 years from now, we may be talking about broadband connection as a dinosaur. You might be talking more wireless connections for a lot of stuff. The other thing I wanted to say is that just my recommendation as you look at developing a sewer authority would be to not try to recreate the wheel, try to look and see if there's any other counties within New York State that have done this. And maybe ones that haven't successfully done it, see if there's any that have tried and failed and see what the obstacles they ran into to do that and see if we can avoid those. Because I've done some looking and maybe they're done more regionally or things like that, but I haven't seen where there's an actual county that's doing this. So maybe it wouldn't be a county, but maybe like a development authority,
Right.
Like Dank or somebody like that for the North Country. So it's not necessarily I don't know how this would develop. Would it be an entity that would be part of a department at the county level? Or would this be a completely separate authority that just happens to be named Oswego County Sewer Authority?
Yeah, but you generally derive that authority from some higher authority, if you will, and it could be the county government could appoint members, there's a couple of different ways that
Sure,
can.
because I mean, would it have to be something that would be specifically Oswego County, or could it reach out to adjacent counties or
County and
neighborhoods?
County.
I don't think that there's a specific prohibition against that, it's
Okay.
just a question of coordinating that, and we're having a difficult time just
Sure.
trying to get it.
I wonder because
Well,
there's,
tier.
I believe that the Phoenix wastewater treatment plant also serves Onondaga County right over the line, so you run into issues of, you know, if this is something that's gonna specifically do Oswego County, but you have existing assets that are serving multiple counties, how do you do address that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's essentially, addressed through intermunicipal cooperation agreements. I mean, authority is essentially a quasi-governmental agency, which it would have the authority to contract with, you know, other municipalities in that regard.
So
So those are good issues to
Yeah.
address or recognize and identify, but I think those solutions are pretty
So I
much
guess
set.
just find what the precedents, if there's precedent for development authorities that already operate this way, see what they've done well, what they haven't, and learn from that, and incorporate that into our roadmap.
Yeah.
So
Good idea.
Dave, could this go back to a deliverable, to something that we expect from Center State to talk about authorities, to work with authorities as far as infrastructure and things that can be part, would that be part of it?
Well, so there's a couple ways to look at what they could do for you. So let's say that we wanted to really narrow the scope of an infrastructure project that they could help with. Hypothetically, we could own a lot more property in the town of Schuylkill adjoining our current industrial park. And we understand that the current wastewater service there is insufficient to build out the park. So we could say, we'd like you to work with us to find the money to increase the capacity at the Phoenix plant, and here's why. And so you've got your industrial park, you've got things in the Phoenix DRI plan, projects that exist, and developers ready to do things if there was capacity. So here's the reasoning behind why we need this, and we need you to go through URI or the governor's office or whoever. We need you to sell this plan to somebody, and that's specific to a site and identified projects. Or you could take it more broadly and say, we think that there's an opportunity for us to have a local development authority in the county that would take care of infrastructure, things like sewer. And we want you to help put the process together to be able to make this successful sell to the public when it goes to referendum. So it depends on what you want to accomplish. And you, like Len said, design the scope and then give it to them and say, what are you gonna charge us to make this happen?
Okay.
My thought with the sewer authority is, let's have Kevin do some research as far as what's out there and where we're at and what legally would need to happen. And then we develop an RFP that Center State can look at, and somebody else can look at too, and say, here, who's gonna hold our hand going down this road? Is it Center State, or is it somebody else? Is it Dank? Is it somebody else that's gonna help us get to the point where we need to get?
Whoever it is.
Yeah. So, does that make sense?
Okay.
Or to Barry's point, it could be some other entity in the private sector
Yeah.
that is specialized on making that kind of stuff happen.
Public-private partnerships.
Yeah.
Just so we're clear, both Rich Mitchell and I have begun looking at this, and we're kind of coordinating our research in that regard. So, but I'm confident that we can get you something for the next meeting.
Great, that's good, and David's input is by meeting with the towns and municipalities, and if they have a, favorable response to something like this, that means definitely we should be looking to move forward on it. And David, maybe if we, I reach out to you about infrastructure with, some of your key people, some of the deliverables or some of the items that we expect from Center State could include whatever the committee deems critical. So, good discussion. Anything else under?
Are we gonna set the next meeting before we go into executive session in case people wanna leave? Or should we, or, not me,
We have some things to
You
vote
got a
on.
rope on your lip.
We'll vote when we come out of executive session, I guess.
Oh, we do have,
There's, there are some things, yes, I think so.
they're on the other business.
18 needs, this we'll discuss later, needs
Yeah.
something approved.
Okay.
19 needs something approved,
Okay.
yeah.
So,
You ready
So
to go into
Are we
executive?
preparing to go into executive
we're
session?
preparing to go into executive
Well, it needs
session.
a little
Don't turn it off yet.
Don't turn it off yet, okay.
No.
Let me know.
Kevin, I'm gonna ask you for,
Thanks, gentlemen. Or you're staying for,
Staying.
yeah.
For 18?
yes,
So the reason for going into an executive session would be pursuant to Public Officers Law, Section 105, subsection 1, paragraph, in this case, well, there's two provisions, F and H. F is the, dealing with the financial credit history of a particular person or corporation, and H is the proposed acquisition of real property, but only when publicity would substantially affect the value thereof. And I believe that the topic that we're going to discuss fits both of those categories. So that would be the basis of going into executive session, and just a motion to do so at this time.
thank you, Kevin, so I have a
I'll
motion.
second the motion.
I'll make the motion.
Motion,
Tim made the motion, I'll second.
second it, what time?
11:56.
11:56, okay,
We gotta
we
vote
have a
on it.
motion second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, executive session.
Okay.
We're good?
Good.
Okay, excuse me, we're gonna go back up to number 18, authorize entering into 3 option agreements for industrial park expansion. I'm gonna need a motion and a second on that.
I'll make the motion.
Have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Do we need Tim here to vote?
We got a quorum.
Got one. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, Clyce Equipment subordination request. Do I have a motion to?
I'll move it.
Len, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, delinquent loan report. Do I have a motion on delinquent loan report?
I'll move it.
Motion by Barry, second.
Morris.
Second by Morris. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, any other business?
I have a couple items.
Okay,
One is, as we're all aware, that IDA is required, any authority is required to do annual reporting in the Paris system, the New York State reporting for authority, the ABO is a system for reporting. We're behind on that. Our fiscal year ended in July 31st. We'd have 90 days after that to complete the reporting, which put it October 31st. And now here we are on January 17th, and we're not done. There's 5 sections. We have 4 of those 5 complete, and Teresa, help me if I misstate anything, but we have another section that is sort of partial complete, partially working through pulling some files and getting the data ready to put in. The main part that's left is putting in the data for new projects, which requires, at this time, we're looking at this process, but we have to go back to the applications from all the projects we had in fiscal 2019, which was a fairly busy year, especially here in downtown Oswego, lots of mixed-use development. There was a long list of projects, so we've put time, Teresa has put time into it this week, but we're not going to be done today. We'll be done by the first half of next week, I think, or the first part of next week. So that's the plan. Typically in the past, we've missed the deadline. Typically we've been able to get it completed around Christmas time, but this year we're a little behind that. So that's the update. We have Phil Church did receive a second notice, escalated kind of notice about us being behind. Anyway, that's basically where we are with that.
Kevin, thank you. Just
I
let
have
me know
another
when
point.
it's done and
Yeah,
completed and
yes,
sent out.
and if, hopefully we
the
won't,
Paris report.
or barring any unexpected things we come up with, we should have it done next week. I have another point for discussion and other business. I've been approached by the Port of Oswego Authority about the idea of helping them finance a crane, a large crane, a 360-ton crane. It looks like this. And it's hard to see the picture, but it's a mobile. What they're preparing to buy is a mobile crane that can be moved around on the east side of the port, but also theoretically could be driven around to the. Moved around to the west side if needed, or but it would be used for basically cargo unloading. Not bulk cargo, but pieces of construction projects that come into the port could be used for containers. Moving things around the port. They have a small crane today, here's my notes over there, 30-ton crane I think they have today, which isn't adequate for the large pieces that come in on these ships sometimes, these one-offs. There's also a lot of opportunities, according to Bill Scriber, 4 onshore wind projects representing 140 turbines are already confirmed for upstate New York through the end of 2021. At the moment, the Port of Oswego can't compete in that business because they can't lift them off the ships. They're the only port on the lake that doesn't have a crane of something like this capacity. So,
all that's been going to Ogdensburg.
Yes, yeah, exactly. That's what Bill told me.
And you can't get it from there to here.
Well, yeah, depending where it's going. Yeah. It would add some man hours to the longshoreman operations going on up there now. He's estimated 3,500 man hours through the end of 2021 would be added, which is about 2 years. So it's less than 1 FTE equivalent based on how he sees things. But he thinks that it could add a couple of positions sometime later if it gets into more volume. But it's being maybe a bit conservative. But the question is, should the County of Oswego IDA be financing another authority. This would be a potential item that could be leased to the port. They have the legal ability to enter into leases. They do it all the time for other vehicles and other smaller equipment. So we could use the pilot EDF lease fund. It is a driver of economic activity. It would help the port increase their capacity and their capabilities.
How much is
they're looking to buy a used one, so that market changes all the time. But based on one they have their eyes set on now, it's $600,000, and it would have all the OSHA certifications and everything when they purchased it. So
Will this be shared expense or?
yeah.
100%?
So basically, the ask is 400 to cover. I guess I haven't done a full analysis of this yet, obviously, but 500,000 is their kind of target price, and that they would self-finance 200,000 and asking for financing of 300,000.
Oh, they have bonding authority, right?
They do. But to bond for something of this size is not cost effective, but there may be a possibility to bond it in another bond and then pay off this lease. Yeah, package it together with some other project.
We funded another authority before.
No, not to
That's
my
what I was just
knowledge.
gonna ask Kevin, you know.
Yeah, Kevin approached me on this a little while ago, and I can't recall that we've ever done that. Not saying it offhand can't be done, but we've never done it.
Is this something that they need to know at this meeting, or is it something that we can?
They want to get it as soon as possible to be able to start to bid on this work and get things scheduled for using the crane. But on the other hand, they haven't ever had it, so it's there's no particular. They can also rent a crane. That's another point, but it's expensive. It can cost $100,000 to bring one of those cranes up here, and then scheduling it.
Especially with the jib and stuff that's got on it. Just
Yeah.
putting it together would.
And JPW Riggers is basically booked for the whole year, their
Yeah.
equipment, so it's not, they basically can't get it anyway, even though they have in the past.
They haven't applied, they've just made an inquiry.
Correct, yeah, Bill would have applied had I let him, but I told him
So
to
there's a whole
wait and see.
process with the public hearing and all that stuff.
There would be a public hearing,
Yeah,
because it's
because-
over 100,000, right?
That crane won't sit there long for 600, it's worth more than that, so.
Yeah,
That'll be gone.
but they've been watching the used market, and I mean, they do come up from time to time, but.
Because I don't know if we're discussing the merits of it, but $500,000 for less than one FTE a year seems a lot to me. But
Well, it's 300,000 that we'd be putting forward.
It's $500,000, the particular crane they're looking at now is $500,000, they would self-finance 200,000 and, out of.
But this also
their
could
own
lead
funds.
to more, development as far as shipping into Oswego Harbor too.
The other.
Right now, they don't have any
Yeah.
way of unloading like that.
There's no reason the Port of Oswego couldn't also lease that crane with union operators to other projects in the area that are off the port also. I don't know if the port wants to get in the crane rental business, but if there was a significant construction project or something in the area, they could use that crane for other purposes. They're not restricted on that, their authority.
They just have to be insured.
Obviously,
Yeah, yes.
I mean, the big question is, can we do it? I mean, that,
Yeah,
I
can,
guess
exactly.
to
Can we
me-
and should we, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, to me,
The question
there's
is, what
pluses.
other options do they have? I mean, if it's something that we're not comfortable with. Do they go to a bank and lease it?
They could.
Equipment finance company, cheap.
The people banging down the doors with 2 leases right now.
But all of that's going to be more expensive than if they were just bond for it, right?
Well, it's that one-time cost of the bonding, I think, that makes
Well,
this.
by itself, you're saying if they
Yeah,
want to
but
work
in the
something
future,
else.
yeah, they could wrap it into another.
Now, if they want to buy
investment
it though,
phase.
they could finance it. Equipment finance company will finance it.
Yeah, or with an equipment lease, I guess, either way. Bill had a preference to leasing versus buying with like a lease with a,
Well,
or you
yeah,
buy
yeah.
it at the end, or $1 or whatever, yeah. And I'm not sure exactly why that was.
Who is the owner? Did he say?
Oh, this particular crane? Oh, I have no idea. Yeah, I have no idea. This is something they found
Yeah,
on
just
the internet,
equipment
basically.
figure or something.
Yeah. I believe they've talked to the owner based on what they said, but
Probably wants to use it for this season coming up.
Well, I know it's the pain that wind parts can't come in here.
yeah, sure.
So
But
what's the pleasure of?
Gotta find out whether or not we can even do it, would
Yeah.
be the first.
Yeah, I've gotta do a little bit of further research and whether an IDA can provide any type of financial assistance to another authority. So I don't know.
Won't be nothing today then.
But I think that, you know, that if the answer is yes, it can, then obviously it triggers a whole nother set of process and application and public hearing and all the rest of it. So, excuse me, I'll attempt to get an answer as soon as possible and then convey that to Kevin and.
Till the next meeting if you could, and you wanted to, you have the initial resolution and start all that.
I mean, the question is, would we?
Would we do
Would
it
we
anyway?
entertain-
So,
I'd like-
just,
I'd like
we
some
wanted to
guidance
waste the
on that
time.
as well.
Well, yeah, it's two-part.
Yeah,
two-part
would we
analysis, right?
entertain doing it if we could?
Assuming it's allowable, is there then the willingness to do it?
Barry, going back to you, financially, what's the advantage of going through the IDA versus, you know,
We'll get a better rate.
just
Assuming.
a better rate?
I don't know what I don't know what they're looking at there, but they should be getting a 4.5.
Yeah, I mean, our standard rate is 4%, and I think I've discussed 7 years with Bill on a, you know, on a lease term.
And
I don't know what, I mean, I don't know how far he's explored alternative financing, to be honest. I haven't gotten
but
that deep into
he
this
could
with him.
finance it for that money.
Probably could, yeah, and for a piece of equipment like that, I would think so.
So can you speak with Bill about, well, Kevin's first of all gotta find out whether it's possible to do this and find out the financial terms of us doing it versus like what Barry was discussing with private financing.
Or at least a lease with a balloon. That's what he's probably looking for.
Yeah, like a $1 balloon at the end, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So at least we have a little more information to work on at the next meeting.
My sense is it's a way for us to take some of that money and earn some interest back on it that can go back into to re.
How long is he looking at, did he say how long he's looking at?
7 years.
7 years?
Yeah, I
Okay.
discussed a 7-year term.
Okay, that's not bad.
Well, I wanna give him credit, he's expanded that
Oh, yeah.
work in a lot of ways, and a lot of things, and,
Well, that Irisburg port's busy. I mean, you go up there, it's
Yeah,
busy.
that's what I'm saying.
Nothing like this one.
Are you opposed to this then, or?
I'd want to hear more information. I'm gonna have, you know, like what's the growth potential here? Like you had said, I mean, it can't be just the one full time. I mean, there's no way you're gonna be able to justify spending out of that fund for one full time. So
Yeah, he does state that it could result up to 7,500 man hours, so say 3 to 4 employees for the acquisition of this.
See, they all work part-time down there. There's a few of them that are down
That's
there
why it's man
full-time,
hours and not.
the Hibberts and stuff, but,
right, it's tied to the fund though that you'd have to be able to justify the economic expansion. So I mean, if it was coming out of somewhere else, maybe not. But if it's out of that fund, we gotta be able to tell a better story than one full time eligible for. And that's my thought.
yeah, but then we also gotta anticipate the trucking that's gonna take place to move stuff that they bring into the port, jobs, that's what we wanna do.
Just tell
Yeah, Zappa won't place it. They'll put it on a truck and they're gonna have to move it and put it wherever they're gonna.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, they'll have to, but whatever the trucking company is.
And ask them if it's time sensitive as far as that crane, cause
I
Barry
wouldn't
made
be
a point to
surprised.
something like that.
Well, that crane could be sold already.
Yeah,
And
that could be gone.
it's time sensitive more for, they understand that. They've been looking at cranes, so that was the latest
They're
one
trying
that
just
they
to
had.
find-
Yeah, to understand what the used market is, so.
Okay.
I think we just assume that one's gone, but they can inquire about it, of course, yeah.
Okay. Anything else under other business? Except
Not for
for
me.
scheduling our next meeting? Oh, did you wanna? Oh, no, we can't do it. Never mind.
After the meeting.
Yep.
Did you already vote on the other thing?
Yeah.
I'm a yes on that, by the way. Sorry, I was. Oh.
Okay, so what date, would, you be looking at, Cal?
We have to have, well, we just approved 3 initial resolutions, and which requires 3 public hearings and 3 deviation letters, so looking later in the month of February.
I'm out until the 21st. That's my week away.
Okay.
I'm out, end of the month, 3 weeks.
The end of February.
No, I'm sorry, just this month.
Okay. What about the 27th or 28th, Thursday or Friday?
Good for both.
I'm okay, I'm moving with it.
Yeah, I am too.
Do one.
Let's,
Which one you want?
What you got, Kevin?
28th may be difficult for me, but,
for the 27th anyway.
Yeah, me too,
27th
actually.
is good, gives us the next day to get things done.
That's on a Friday?
It's a Thursday, the 27th.
Oh, Thursday.
27.
February
So I think that's
27th at
good for
9
you.
a.m.? That's great, I never have to change the time. Okay, so, February 27th, 9 a.m., next meeting. Now, that works for you, Kevin, as far as,
Yeah, this should give us ample time to get all that done.
Bless you.
With 3 projects, it'll be a fair amount, but we'll get it done.
okay,
Operations Oswego County Board meeting that week as well,
it's one,
Monday.
Thank you, Tim.
That was me.
Oh, it was? Well,
That's
all
right.
You
Where's
sent
it
an
now?
March
email,
9th.
it's on March 9th.
March 9th.
Same time, 3 p.m., but
Yeah,
March
we
9th.
did
No, that's
send it, no, we
I,
did
you know, I
send it.
remember seeing that now.
yeah, I got it. Just wanna make sure. Okay, anything else under other business? Motion to adjourn?
Oh my, second.
Motion to second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
12:42.
I was just gonna bring up a point, I was gonna show you some stuff about the airport, but it's late. I'll put that off to the next meeting, we have, the maps and construction.